They say Alpha King Riker Voss never fails. Every gifted soul in his empire wears chains, seers, witches, warlocks, all broken, all owned. But when a mysterious healer appears who cannot be bound, cannot be broken, cannot be controlled, his absolute power meets its first real challenge. She doesn't fight him. She doesn't fear him. She simply exists beyond his reach. And that impossibility will either save his kingdom or destroy everything he's ever built. Stick around until the end to see how this story unfolds. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. The rain came down like hammers on the capital's obsidian towers, each drop exploding against stone that had seen 3 centuries of blood and dominion. Inside the throne room of Valterra Keep, Alpha King Riker Voss stood before the southern windows, hands clasped behind his back, watching lightning carve the sky into pieces. His reflection in the black glass showed a man who'd never learned to smile, all sharp angles and colder edges, a face carved by decisions that would have broken lesser men. "Bring her in." His voice cut through the storm's roar without rising above a murmur. That was the thing about absolute power. You never had to shout. The double doors groaned open. 4 royal guards entered first, their ceremonial armor glinting despite the dim light, hands resting on sword hilts they'd never actually need to draw. Behind them walked 3 members of the High Council, their ceremonial robes heavy with embroidered sigils of binding and dominion. And between them, unrestrained, unchained, unmarked by a single bruise, she walked in like she was alone. Riker didn't turn. Not yet. He watched her reflection approach in the window glass, studying the way she moved. No hesitation in her stride. No darting glances to measure exits or threats. She moved through his throne room the way water moved through a stream, not defiant, not careful, just flowing. Nyra Solon. He said her name like he was tasting it. The healer from Greymark. That's what they're calling me this week. Her voice came from directly behind him now, closer than his guards would have allowed anyone else to get. Last week I was the Vagrant Witch, month before that, the Devil's Daughter. People get creative when they're frightened. Now he turned. She was smaller than he'd expected, barely reached his shoulder. Dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, clothes that looked like she'd slept in them, hands that showed calluses from actual work instead of the soft fingers of nobility. Everything about her screamed ordinary, except her eyes. They held his gaze without flinching, without calculation, without the desperate intensity of someone trying to prove they weren't afraid. She looked at him the way someone might look at a mountain, acknowledging its presence without being impressed by its height. "You saved a man's life in Greymark Central Square," Riker said, circling her slowly. The council members shifted, uncomfortable. None of them liked when their king moved unpredictably. 17 witnesses. He'd been trampled by horses, ribs crushed, lungs filling with blood. Dead within minutes by any physician's assessment. He wasn't dead when I got there. No. But he should have been by the time you finished. Riker stopped in front of her again. You laid hands on him, spoke no incantations, drew no ritual circles, burned no sacred herbs, and then a man whose chest had been caved in stood up and walked home. Lucky day for him. Don't. The word came out sharp enough to cut. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending it was luck. Every gifted healer in this kingdom is registered, tested, and bound to the crown's service. We know what healing magic looks like. We know its limits. You exceeded those limits by a margin that shouldn't exist. Nyra shrugged, the gesture so casual it was almost offensive. Maybe your tests are incomplete. Behind her, Counselor Merrick sucked in a breath. Speaking to the king like that was the kind of mistake people didn't walk away from. But Riker felt something flicker in his chest. Not anger, curiosity. Merrick, he said without looking away from Nyra, show her the standard binding protocol. The old counselor stepped forward, producing a silver collar from his robes. The metal was inscribed with runes that pulsed with a faint blue light, ancient magic, the kind that predated the kingdom itself. Riker had seen it used on dozens of gifted individuals. The collar didn't suppress their abilities entirely, just redirected them, made their power answerable to the crown instead of to themselves. Marique approached Nyra from behind, raising the collar toward her neck. It never made contact. 3 feet from her skin, the silver began to tarnish. The runes flickered, dimmed, died. By the time Marique's hands trembled enough to drop it, The collar looked like it had spent a century at the bottom of the ocean, corroded, useless, powerless. Silence crashed through the throne room. "Try the binding oath," Riker said quietly. Counselor Thess stepped forward this time, a woman whose iron-gray hair matched her iron-gray soul. She'd written half the laws that kept gifted individuals under crown control. Her voice rose in the formal cadence of the binding chant, words in a language older than the kingdom, syllables that resonated with power thick enough to taste. Naira stood there and let her finish. Nothing happened. Thess tried again, pouring more force into the words, veins standing out on her neck. The air pressure in the room changed. Guards shifted their weight. Even Riker felt the pull of magic gathering, concentrating, reaching out to wrap around Naira like chains made of will itself, and simply dissolved. Not broken, not resisted, just dissolved, like trying to grab smoke. Enough! Riker's word cut through Thess's third attempt. The counselor stumbled back, breathing hard, looking at Naira like she'd just personally offended reality itself. Riker moved closer to the healer, close enough to see the faint scar above her left eyebrow, close enough to smell rain and road dust on her clothes. "What are you?" "Tired," Naira said. "It's been a long ride to the capital. Your men don't stop for sleep when they're following royal orders." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." She met his eyes again, and there was something in her gaze now, not quite pity, not quite amusement. "You want me to be something grand, something that fits in your categories. Witch, sorceress, demon, whatever label makes this make sense to you, but sometimes," she paused, weighing her words, "sometimes things just are what they are, and trying to name them doesn't change anything." "Everything in my kingdom has a name," Riker said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Everything in my kingdom has a place. Everything in my kingdom serves a purpose that I define. That's how order works. That's how civilization survives." "Is it working?" The question landed like a slap. "Excuse me?" Naira gestured vaguely around the throne room. "All this, the binding collars, the forced oaths, the registration of anyone born with a gift they didn't ask for. Has it made your kingdom safer, or has it just made you feel safer?" Counselor Merrick moved forward, face purple with rage. "You dare!" "Yes." Naira didn't even look at him. "I dare. Because what's he going to do? Kill me for asking questions? Put me in chains that won't hold? Threaten me with consequences that only work if I cooperate?" She finally broke eye contact with Riker to glance at Merrick. "Your whole system of control is built on a foundation of fear, and I'm not afraid. So where does that leave us?" Riker should have been furious. Should have had her dragged to the dungeons, thrown into the deepest cell, left to reconsider her defiance in the dark. That's what any sane ruler would do when faced with someone who threatened the basic structure of his authority. Instead, he laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. It was the laugh of a man who just realized the game he'd been playing had new rules he didn't understand yet. Dark, sharp, edged with something that might have been delight if delight hadn't been carved out of him years ago. "Leave us," he said. The guards hesitated. The council looked at each other with varying degrees of alarm. "All of you. Now." They went. They always did. Even when they thought it was a mistake, even when they wanted to argue, the weight of his authority was still enough to move them. The doors closed with a hollow boom that echoed up into the vaulted ceiling. Alone with her now, alone with the first person in 15 years who'd looked at him without fear, Riker felt something shift in his chest. Something he'd thought he'd killed a long time ago. Interest. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the council chairs arranged around the war table to his left. "I'd rather stand." It wasn't a request. "I know." Naira remained standing. "But I'm still rather stand. Your guards rode hard to get me here. My legs need the circulation." Riker stared at her. People didn't refuse him. Not criminals, not nobles, not foreign ambassadors trying to navigate delicate negotiations. His word was law. His law was order, and order was the only thing standing between civilization and chaos. And she just said no. To standing, like it was nothing. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met," he said slowly, "or the most suicidal." "Neither. I'm just tired of pretending." Naira walked over to the windows he'd been standing at earlier, looking out at the storm. "You asked what I am. I don't have a good answer because I don't really know. I've always been able to do things that other healers can't. Always been able to see things before they happen. Not visions, exactly. More like probabilities. Paths that reality might take depending on what choices get made. Precognition. Riker moved to stand beside her at the window. We have seers who claim similar abilities. Your seers are frauds. She said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. Or they're reading tea leaves and calling it prophecy. What I do is different. When I see something, it's not fate. It's not destiny. It's just likelihood. And the thing about likelihood is that it can change. Can you control it? Define control. Riker turned to face her, studying her profile against the storm-lit glass. Can you choose what you see? Can you make things happen the way you want them to? Sometimes. Nira's reflection showed a slight frown. When I speak a choice out loud, when I commit to a path, reality tends to bend in that direction. Not always, not perfectly, but more often than chance would allow. Show me. No. There it was again, that simple, devastating refusal. Why not? Because you're not asking to understand, Nira said, finally turning to look at him directly. You're asking to categorize, to measure, to figure out how to control it. And I've spent my entire life avoiding people like you for exactly that reason. People like me. Riker's voice went cold. And what am I, exactly? Powerful, dangerous, used to getting what you want. She didn't flinch from his gaze. The kind of person who sees everything as either a tool to use or a threat to eliminate. And I'm not interested in being either. Then why did you come? The question came out harsher than he'd intended. My men gave you a choice. Accompany them willingly or be brought in chains. You chose to come. Why? For the first time since entering the throne room, Nira hesitated. Her eyes flickered with something, uncertainty, calculation. He couldn't read it. Because I saw what would happen if I didn't, she said finally. Your men would have tried to force me. They would have failed. People would have gotten hurt, probably killed. Word would have spread about the healer who resisted the crown's authority. And you would have sent more men, stronger men. Eventually, an army. And more people would have died, all because I wanted to stay hidden in a town that didn't even want me there in the first place. So you came to prevent bloodshed. I came to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. There's a difference. Riker felt that flicker in his chest again, stronger this time. And what happens now? You're here, in my capital, in my throne room, subject to my authority whether you acknowledge it or not. What's your plan? I don't have one. Nira smiled for the first time, and it transformed her face entirely, made her look younger, less guarded. That's the thing about seeing probabilities instead of fate. I know this conversation could go 1,000 different ways. Some of them end with me in your dungeons. Some end with me walking out of here free. Some end with you trying to kill me, and others end with you offering me a position in your court. And you don't know which one will actually happen? I know which ones are more likely, but that changes with every word we exchange, every choice we make. Right now, in this moment, there are 17 different high-probability outcomes branching out from this conversation. She tilted her head slightly. Would you like to know what they are? Yes. No, you wouldn't. Her smile faded. Because knowing the probable outcomes would change them. You'd try to force the one you wanted, and in trying to force it, you'd create a new probability tree entirely. That's the paradox of what I can do. The more I reveal, the less accurate it becomes. Riker turned away from the window, pacing the length of the throne room. His footsteps echoed off stone worn smooth by centuries of rulers before him, each one trying to impose order on an inherently chaotic world, each one failing in different ways. 3 days ago, he said, not looking at her, my cousin attempted to poison me at dinner. The vial was recovered from his chambers. Under interrogation, he confessed to conspiring with the Duke of Northmarch to destabilize my rule. Both were executed this morning. He heard Nira move behind him but didn't turn. Your cousin was innocent, she said quietly. Riker spun. What? He didn't poison you. The Duke of Northmarch did that on his own, using your cousin's proximity as a cover. Your cousin found out about it, panicked, and hid the evidence in his chambers thinking he could quietly dispose of it later. He confessed under torture because he thought taking responsibility might save the Duke's family. Naira's voice was steady, clinical. You executed an innocent man who was trying to protect children. The words hit like physical blows. Riker's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. How could you possibly know that? I told you I see things, probabilities, patterns. The truth of what happened carries a different weight than the lie you believed. She moved closer to him, fearless despite the rage that must have been written across his face. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because you need to understand what I am. I see the truth beneath the surface, and sometimes that truth is the last thing anyone wants to hear. If you knew this, Riker said, his voice dropping to something deadly, why didn't you speak up before they were executed? Because I wasn't here. I was 3 days' ride away, trying to stay invisible in a town that barely tolerated my presence. Nira held his gaze. And even if I had been here, even if I'd stood in your throne room and told you the truth, would you have believed me? A stranger with no proof except her word against your interrogators and their torture-extracted confession. She was right. He wouldn't have believed her. He'd built his entire rule on systems and structures precisely because individual word, no matter how earnest, could never be trusted against documented evidence and established procedure. But his cousin's face flashed through his mind. The young man had looked confused at his execution. Not defiant, not broken. Just confused. Like he couldn't understand how everything had gone so wrong. Because it had gone wrong, and Riker had been the one to make it irreversible. You should leave, he said, turning away from her. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Disappear. If you're smart, you'll get so far from my kingdom that I'll never find you again. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. You were right before. I see things as either tools or threats, and you're too dangerous to be a tool, which means you're a threat. The smart play is to eliminate you before you become a bigger problem. Then why are you sending me away instead of having me killed? Riker didn't answer, couldn't answer, because he didn't know. Footsteps behind him, light, measured, coming closer. She was either brave or insane to approach him when he was like this, coiled tension looking for something to strike. In 4 days, Naira said from directly behind him, an assassin will enter your chambers disguised as a servant. She'll have poison on a needle hidden in her sleeve. She'll wait until you're asleep and inject it directly into your neck. You'll be dead within seconds. No one will know until morning. Riker's blood went cold. Who sent her? That's not how this works. I don't see names and faces. I see patterns and outcomes. Someone in your inner circle is compromised. Someone close enough to know your routines, your guards' rotation schedules, your sleeping habits. The assassin herself is just a tool. Finding her won't solve your problem. Then what will? I don't know yet. The probabilities are still shifting, too many variables. She moved around to stand in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes. But I can tell you this, if you send me away right now, you die in 4 days. If you keep me here, there's a chance I can see enough to prevent it. It was extortion, elegant, impossible to verify, perfectly calibrated to exploit his position. She was leveraging the one thing he couldn't ignore, a credible threat to his life, to secure her own value to him. Smart, ruthless, effective. He should have admired it. Instead, he felt something uncomfortably close to relief. You'll stay in the East Wing, he said. Under guard. The guards won't be able to stop me if I want to leave. I know. They're not there to keep you in. They're there to keep everyone else out. Riker moved to the war table, pulling a silver bell from beneath it. 3 chimes brought 2 guards back through the doors. Escort Miss Solon to the Azure Suite. She's to be afforded every courtesy. Anyone who touches her without permission answers to me personally. The guards saluted, uncertain but obedient. Naira started to follow them, then paused at the threshold. Why are you doing this? She asked. Riker looked at her across the expanse of his throne room, this woman who'd walked in unchained and would leave the same way. Because for the first time in 15 years, someone told me a truth I didn't want to hear without sugarcoating it to spare my feelings. That's either worth protecting or worth studying. He smiled, and it wasn't kind. Maybe both. And if I betray you, then you'll have done what I expect everyone to do eventually. At least I'll have seen it coming. Something flickered in her expression, surprise, sympathy. It was gone too fast to identify. Get some rest, Riker said. Tomorrow we'll discuss exactly how you're going to prevent my murder. She left without another word. Alone in his throne room, surrounded by the weight of 3 centuries of absolute authority, Alpha King Riker Voss stood in the dark and wondered if he'd just made the smartest decision of his reign, or the last one. The Azure Suite was nicer than anywhere Nira had lived in her entire life combined. High ceilings inlaid with gold leaf, windows that overlooked the capital's sprawling garden districts, furniture that probably cost more than Greymark's entire annual tax revenue. A bed large enough to sleep 4 people comfortably. A private bathing chamber with hot water that flowed from silver fixtures carved to look like leaping fish. She stood in the middle of it all, still wearing her road-dusty clothes, and felt absolutely nothing. Luxury didn't impress her. Safety didn't comfort her. She'd learned a long time ago that the world's beautiful things were usually just pretty cages with softer bars. One of the guards, a young woman with carefully neutral expression, lingered in the doorway. "Do you require anything, miss?" "Privacy." The guard nodded and pulled the door closed. Nira waited until the footsteps faded down the hallway. Then she walked to the windows, pressed her forehead against the cool glass, and let herself shake. The king had no idea how close he'd come to dying tonight. Not from an assassin. From her. When he'd laughed, that dark, surprised sound that had cut through the tension like a blade through silk, she'd felt 17 different probabilities collapse into one. A single path forward that terrified her more than any dungeon or execution could. Because in that moment, in that laugh, she'd seen something she hadn't seen in years. A future she might actually want. Working beside him, challenging him, becoming the thing he needed most. Someone who couldn't be controlled, wouldn't be broken, refused to kneel. But futures like that had costs. Terrible costs. She'd seen them all branching out from this moment like cracks in glass. Saw the council's growing fear turning to desperation. Saw innocent people caught in the crossfire of a power struggle they didn't understand. Saw the king forced to choose between his throne and her freedom. Saw herself becoming exactly the kind of weapon she'd spent her whole life refusing to be. "This was a mistake," she whispered to her reflection. "I should run, right now, while I still can." But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't. Because in the throne room, when Riker had asked her why she came, she'd lied. She hadn't come to prevent bloodshed. She'd come because in all the futures she could see, in all the branching probabilities and shifting outcomes, there was only one path where she wasn't alone anymore. And that path started here, in his capital, in his throne room, with a man who controlled everything finally meeting something he couldn't control. The question wasn't whether she'd stay. The question was what it would cost them both when she did. Dance. 3 floors below, in a chamber that officially didn't exist on any palace map, 3 members of the High Council sat around a table carved from a single piece of obsidian. The room had no windows, no decorations, nothing to suggest it was anything more than forgotten storage. That was intentional. Counselor Marique poured wine with hands that still trembled from the binding ritual's failure. "She has to die." "Agreed." Thess didn't touch her glass. "But how? Traditional magic doesn't work on her. Conventional binding fails. Even proximity to blessed artifacts causes them to corrode. Then we use conventional methods." The third council member, a man named Severin, who rarely spoke in public forums, leaned forward into the candlelight. A blade in the dark, poison in her food, an unfortunate accident during her morning walk. She may be immune to magic, but she still bleeds like everyone else. "The king has placed her under his personal protection," Merrick countered. "Any attempt on her life will be seen as an attempt on his authority. Only if we're caught." Severin's smile was a calculated thing. "And we won't be. I have assets who specialize in discretion." Thess shook her head. "You're thinking too small. Killing her solves the immediate problem, but creates a larger one. The king will investigate. He'll tear the palace apart looking for answers. And if he discovers our involvement—" "He won't," Severin said flatly. "He might." Merrick drained his wine in one swallow. "Did you see the way he looked at her? The way he laughed when she challenged him? I've served Riker Voss for 12 years. I've never seen him laugh. Not once. Not ever." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. "Then we have an even bigger problem than we thought," Thess said finally. "Because if the king is developing an attachment to her, he's not." Severin's voice carried absolute certainty. "Riker Voss doesn't form attachments. He forms strategies. Right now she's interesting to him, a puzzle he wants to solve. But interest fades. Puzzles get solved. And when she stops being useful, he'll discard her himself. And if he doesn't? Severin met Marek's eyes across the table. Then we'll have to choose between our king and our kingdom. Because a ruler who can't control the people around him isn't a ruler. He's a liability. That's treason, Marek whispered. No? Tess finally reached for her wine. That's survival. The crown maintains order through absolute authority. If that authority becomes compromised, if people start to believe there are individuals the king cannot control, the entire system collapses. Chaos returns. And chaos is the only thing more dangerous than any single person. She raised her glass. To order. The others hesitated, then joined her. To order. The toast echoed in the chamber that didn't exist, drunk by people who just decided a stranger's death was worth preserving the world they'd built. None of them noticed the small bird perched in the ventilation shaft above their heads. None of them saw it fly away into the night, carrying their words toward someone who'd been expecting them all along. In the azure sumich. Sweet, Nira opened her eyes from a meditation she hadn't realized she'd fallen into. The bird landed on her windowsill seconds later, shaking rain from its feathers. It wasn't a real bird, not entirely, just a construct she'd shaped from probability and will, given enough form to carry sound across distances. She listened to the council's conspiracy play back in her mind. 4 days until the assassin. But the assassin wasn't the real threat. The real threat was sitting in a room that didn't exist, drinking wine and planning murder in the name of order. Nira had known this would happen, seen it branching out from the moment she'd stepped into the throne room. The council would view her as a threat to their authority. They'd try to eliminate her, and in trying, they'd force Riker to choose, protect his throne, or protect her. She'd hoped, foolishly, desperately, that maybe this time would be different, that maybe she could exist in someone's orbit without becoming a crisis they had to manage. But probabilities didn't care about hope. They only cared about what was likely to happen. And what was likely to happen now was war. Not with swords or armies, with choices, with consequences, with a single question that would define everything that came after. What happens when power discovers it has limits? Nira pressed her hand against the window glass, watching the Capitol's lights flicker through the rain, and made a decision. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. She wouldn't make it easy for anyone. Because if the council wanted her dead, they'd have to go through the one person in this kingdom who just started to question whether absolute control was worth what it cost. And that meant the storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to break. The bird on the windowsill dissolved back into probability. Its purpose served. Nira turned away from the glass and began to plan. Not for survival. For revolution. The azure suite door opened without warning. Nira spun, hand instinctively reaching for a power she rarely used, only to find Riker standing in the doorway. No guards. No announcement. Just him, still wearing the same dark coat from the throne room, eyes carrying something between suspicion and certainty. "You knew I was coming," he said. Not a question. "I saw the probability of it." Nira lowered her hand but didn't relax. "Doesn't mean I'm happy about it." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a deliberate quietness that was somehow worse than slamming it. The space between them contracted even though he hadn't moved closer. Just his presence filled the room differently than furniture or decoration ever could. "What did you see?" Riker asked. "In what sense? Don't play games. You've been standing at that window for 20 minutes. Something happened. Something changed. I want to know what." Nira studied him across the expensive emptiness of the suite. His jaw was tight, shoulders carrying tension he was trying to hide. A man used to reading people, used to extracting information through presence alone. But there was something else there too. Something raw. He was afraid. Not of her, of what she represented. "Your council met," she said finally. 3 of them. In a room that doesn't officially exist. Riker's expression didn't change, but his breathing did. Shallower, faster. "Which 3? Marique? Tess? Severin?" "What did they discuss?" "My death." She said it flatly, watching how the words landed on him. They've decided I'm too dangerous to exist. Immunity to binding magic, resistance to conventional control, proximity to you, it all adds up to a threat they can't tolerate. Severin volunteered to handle the logistics. He has people who specialize in accidents. The silence that followed felt like something alive, dangerous. How do you know this? Riker's voice had gone cold. Not disbelieving, calculating. I told you, I see things, patterns, probabilities. Nira turned back to the window, unable to watch whatever was happening in his face. I also have methods you wouldn't understand and wouldn't approve of if you did. Try me. No. She heard him move. Footsteps crossing the distance between them, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, close enough to be a threat or a promise depending on what he chose next. Look at me, he said. I'd rather not. I don't care what you'd rather do. Look at me. Nira turned. He was closer than she'd thought, near enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. They were dark in the dim light, pupils swallowing iris, expression locked down tight. I don't know what you are, Riker said, each word precise as a blade cut. I don't know how your power works. I don't know if you're telling me the truth or playing an elaborate game to secure your own position. But here's what I do know. If my council is conspiring to kill you without my knowledge or consent, that's not just a threat to you. That's treason against my authority, and I will burn this entire palace to ash before I let anyone undermine my rule. Even for me? Especially for you. His eyes held hers without wavering. You're the first genuinely unknown variable I've encountered in 15 years. That makes you either the most valuable asset in my kingdom or the most dangerous threat. Either way, you're mine to evaluate, mine to control, mine to eliminate if necessary, not theirs. The possessive edge in his voice should have made her angry, should have triggered every instinct she had to run, to resist, to reject being claimed like territory. Instead, it settled something restless in her chest. I don't belong to you, she said quietly. No, but you're in my kingdom, under my protection, subject to my authority whether you acknowledge it or not. He shifted closer, and she could smell rain and power on him. That means anyone who moves against you moves against me, and I will make them regret being born. You're angry. I'm furious. His voice stayed level despite the words. My own council, people I've trusted with the machinery of governance, decided they could overrule my judgment and act independently. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. They're afraid, Nira said. Of me, of what I represent. You saw what happened with the binding collar, with the oath. I exist outside the system you've built. That makes me chaos. And chaos is the one thing your order can't absorb. Then they should have come to me, presented their concerns, made their case. Riker's jaw worked like he was physically chewing anger. Instead, they met in secret and planned murder. That's not governance, that's conspiracy. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. He finally stepped back, giving her space to breathe. Executing them solves the immediate problem, but destabilizes the council. Imprisoning them creates martyrs. Ignoring it encourages more of the same. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so unexpectedly human it almost made her smile. You see probabilities. Which option leads to the least damage? Nira closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the scene. Futures branched out in her mind's eye like tree roots searching for water. Each choice spawning consequences, spawning more choices in an endless fractal pattern. If you execute them, she said slowly, eyes still closed, the remaining council members unite against you out of self-preservation. Your authority becomes absolute but paranoid. You'll spend the next decade rooting out conspiracies, real and imagined. The kingdom survives but becomes brittle. She felt him move closer again, listening. If you imprison them, you create exactly what you said, martyrs. Other nobles start questioning whether your judgment is sound. Whispers begin about the mysterious healer who arrived, and suddenly, council members disappear. Rebellion becomes probable within 18 months. And if I ignore it? They try again, different method, different timeline, but they try, and eventually they succeed. She opened her eyes to find him inches away, staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Or they force you to choose between me and stability, and that choice destroys something in you either way. There has to be another option. There is. Nira held his gaze. You keep them close. You let them think they still have power, and you use me to make them irrelevant. Riker's eyes narrowed. Explain. The Council's authority comes from being the only source of magical expertise and governance strategy. They advise you. They implement your will. They maintain the systems that keep gifted individuals under control. She could see him following her logic, already 3 steps ahead. But if you have someone who can see outcomes before they happen, who can identify threats before they materialize, who can't be bound or controlled by conventional means, what do you need them for? The smile that spread across his face was sharp enough to cut glass. I make you my primary advisor, put you in direct opposition to their authority, force them to prove their value against someone who sees the future. They'll hate me even more. They already want you dead. At least this way you're too visible to kill quietly. He started pacing, energy returning to his movements. I announce it tomorrow, full court assembly. The healer who saved a dying man will now save the kingdom by serving at my right hand. Your council will revolt. Let them. If they're stupid enough to move openly, I can deal with them openly. If they're smart enough to stay quiet, then they're admitting you're more valuable than their objections. Riker stopped pacing, turning to face her with something like excitement in his expression. This could work. This could actually work. There's a cost, Nero warned. There's always a cost. What is it? Me. Working for you. Becoming exactly what I've spent my life avoiding, a tool in someone else's power structure. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the room's warmth. Every time I use my ability to advise you, I'm choosing a future, bending probability, and the more I do it, the more unstable reality becomes around me. Eventually, something breaks. How long do we have? The question was so pragmatic it almost made her laugh. Not, we shouldn't do this, or the risk is too high, on just how long until the consequences catch up. I don't know. Months? Maybe years? Depends on how much I push things. She met his eyes. But it will break eventually. And when it does, you won't be able to stop it. Then we'll deal with it when it happens. Riker moved toward the door, purpose in every step. For now, we have more immediate problems. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Wait. He paused, hand on the doorframe. Why are you doing this? Naira asked. Really doing this? It's not just about undermining your council or securing a strategic advantage. What do you actually want from me? Riker stood there for a long moment, silhouetted against the hallway's torchlight. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't heard from him before. Honesty. For 15 years, I've ruled through absolute certainty. Every decision backed by data, precedent, established protocol. I've made myself into a machine that processes information and outputs order, and it's worked. The kingdom is stable, prosperous, safe. He turned to look at her over his shoulder. But machines don't grow, they don't adapt. They just run until they break down. And lately I've felt myself breaking down, becoming more rigid, more paranoid, more isolated. He stepped back into the room. Then you walk in and nothing works. My binding magic fails. My protocols shatter. My ability to control the situation evaporates. And for the first time in 15 years, he stopped, searching for words. I don't know what happens next. And instead of terrifying me, it feels like waking up. The vulnerability in his admission hung between them like smoke. I'm not here to fix you, Nira said softly, or save you, or be whatever idealized version of chaos you think you need. I know. I'm just a person who sees things, who's tired of running, who made a stupid decision to come here because she thought maybe, just maybe, she could stop being alone for 5 goddamn minutes. I know that too. Riker took another step closer. And I'm still going to use you. Still going to put you in harm's way. Still going to treat you like the strategic asset you are. Because that's what I do. That's what I am. Then we understand each other. Do we? He was right in front of her now, close enough that she could count his heartbeats and the pulse at his throat. Because I think you came here for the same reason I haven't killed you yet. We're both so goddamn tired of being what everyone needs us to be. And maybe, just for a little while, we can be something else with each other. What's that? Honest. The word landed like a confession. Nira felt 17 different futures collapse into one, saw the probability of this moment crystallizing into something inevitable, dangerous, absolutely irreversible. She should step back, should maintain distance, should protect herself from the gravitational pull of a man who consumed everything in his orbit. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft or questioning or tentative. It was collision, desperation. Two people who'd spent too long being untouchable finally making contact. Riker froze for half a heartbeat, surprise, uncertainty. Then his hands were in her hair and he was kissing her back with the same intensity he brought to everything else. Claiming, possessing, taking what he wanted because that's what he did. But Naira gave as good as she got. Bit his lower lip hard enough to draw blood, tangled her fingers in his coat and pulled him closer, refused to be overwhelmed or conquered or controlled even in this, especially in this. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Riker's eyes had gone dark with something that wasn't just desire. "This complicates things," he said, voice rough. "Everything about me complicates things." Naira touched her thumb to the small cut on his lip, watching blood well up. "That's kind of my specialty. I don't do gentle. Good. I'd hate that. I don't do equal partnerships. I own things or I eliminate them." "Then you're going to have a very frustrating time with me." She smiled, sharp and wild. "Because I don't get owned, and you can't eliminate me, so we're at an impasse." Riker's laugh was dark and genuine. "This is insane. Probably. My council will lose their minds. They already have. And you're still going to do this? Stand beside me tomorrow and let me use you as a weapon against them?" Naira pulled him down into another kiss, softer this time, but no less intense. When she spoke, her lips brushed against his. "I'm going to do worse than that. I'm going to be exactly what you need me to be. Unpredictable, uncontrollable, and absolutely on your side. And together, we're going to tear their comfortable little world apart. Why? Because fuck them." She bit his jaw lightly. "They wanted to kill me for existing outside their rules. So I'm going to exist so loudly, they'll wish they'd left me alone." Riker's smile was pure predator. "You're terrifying. You have no idea." He kissed her one more time, hard and possessive and full of promises neither of them would keep. Then he pulled back, straightening his coat with hands that weren't quite steady. "Get some rest," he said, heading for the door again. "Tomorrow, we start a war." "Riker," he paused. "The assassin, in 4 days. Do you believe me about that?" His expression went serious. "I don't know, but I'm not willing to bet my life that you're wrong." He opened the door, paused. "I'll triple the guard rotation, implement new security protocols. If someone's planning to kill me, they'll have to go through an army to do it. That won't be enough." "Then what will be?" Naira closed her eyes, sinking into the scene one more time. Futures branched. Assassins approached from 17 different angles. Guards died. Protocols failed. And in almost every timeline, Riker ended up with a needle in his neck and poison in his blood. Almost every timeline. "Me?" she said, opening her eyes. "I need to be there. In your chambers. When it happens." "Absolutely not. It's the only way." I said no." Riker's voice carried absolute authority. "I won't put you in that position. Won't make you responsible for my survival. That's not what this is." "Then what is this?" He looked at her for a long moment, expression unreadable. "I don't know yet, but it's not you taking a knife meant for me." The door closed behind him before she could argue. Naira stood alone in the azure suite, touching her lips where they still tingled from contact, and felt the future rearranging itself around the choices they'd just made. This wasn't attraction, wasn't strategy, wasn't even mutual need disguised as partnership. This was gravity. Two forces that shouldn't exist pulling at each other, warping everything around them in the process. And in 4 days, one of them was going to die unless she could change a probability that had already solidified into near certainty. She walked back to the window, pressed her forehead against cold glass, and started calculating. Dawn broke over the capital like a wound opening. Naira hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. She'd spent the night mapping probability trees, following assassination attempts through their logical conclusions, watching Riker die in 100 different ways. In 83 of them, she couldn't stop it. In 12, she saved him but died herself. In 5, they both survived. 5 out of 100 wasn't good odds. But it was better than 0. A knock at the door pulled her from the scene. She opened it to find a servant girl barely into her teens, carrying an elaborate dress made of fabric that looked like captured starlight. "Compliments of His Majesty," the girl said, not meeting Naira's eyes. "For the court assembly. He requests your presence in the throne room within the hour." Naira took the dress, feeling its weight. This wasn't clothing, this was armor. A costume designed to transform her from vagabond healer into something the court would have to acknowledge. She hated it immediately. But she put it on anyway. The fabric moved like liquid, clinging in ways that were flattering without being revealing. The neckline was high, almost severe. The sleeves covered her work-scarred hands. Everything about it screamed nobility, power, legitimacy. Everything about it was a lie. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the vagrant who drifted through Greymark trying to stay invisible. In her place stood someone who looked like she belonged in palaces and council chambers. Someone who looked dangerous. Good. 2 guards escorted her through the palace's labyrinthine corridors. Servants stopped to stare. Nobles whispered behind jeweled hands. Word had already spread about the healer who couldn't be bound. About the woman who'd spent private time with the king in the Azure Suite. About the scandal that was coming. The throne room doors stood open. Inside, what looked like every noble in the capital had gathered. Council members in their formal robes, military commanders in dress uniforms, court officials arranged by rank and privilege. And at the center of it all, seated on a throne carved from a single piece of black stone, Riker waited. He looked different in full regalia. Crown of twisted silver, coat lined with fur from creatures that didn't exist anymore. Expression locked into the mask of absolute authority he wore for public consumption. But his eyes found hers across the crowded room, and something in them flickered. Recognition, heat, conspiracy. "Naira Solon," his voice carried to every corner without rising in volume. "Approach the throne." She walked forward through the parting crowd, felt their stares like physical weight, heard their whispers sharp as broken glass. Witch, demon, whore. Let them whisper, let them stare. Let them think whatever they wanted. She'd stopped caring about their opinions the moment she'd decided to stop hiding. Naira stopped at the base of the throne's dais, close enough to see the tension in Riker's shoulders hidden beneath formal posture. "You saved a life in Greymark," he said, making it sound like formal pronouncement instead of conversation. "You demonstrated abilities beyond conventional understanding. You resisted binding magic and traditional oaths, and when brought before me, you spoke truth without fear or favor." The room held its breath. "These qualities," Riker continued, "are exactly what this kingdom needs. Not more yes-men, not more sycophants who tell me what I want to hear, but someone who can see what others cannot, someone who cannot be corrupted or controlled, someone who serves truth before comfort." Counselor Merrick stepped forward, face purple with suppressed rage. "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular." "I'm not finished." Riker's words cut like a blade through flesh. Merrick stumbled back, suddenly remembering who he was interrupting. "Naira Solon, I hereby appoint you to the position of Royal Seer. You will attend all council meetings. You will advise me on matters of state, security, and strategic planning. Your word will carry the weight of my authority, and anyone who questions your legitimacy questions me." The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos erupted. Nobles shouting over each other, council members demanding explanations, military commanders looking confused and alarmed. The noise built like a wave about to break. Riker raised one hand, silence crashed back down. "This is not a debate," he said quietly, and the quiet was more terrifying than any shout. "This is not a suggestion. This is a royal decree. Naira Solon is now part of my inner circle. She will be afforded every protection, every courtesy, every privilege of her position. And if I discover that anyone has attempted to undermine her authority or threaten her safety," his eyes swept across the council members, lingering on Merrick, Thess, and Severin, "I will consider it a personal attack on my judgment, and we all know how I respond to those." The threat hung in the air like smoke from an execution pyre. "Your Majesty," Thess's voice was ice. "With respect, this woman has demonstrated no loyalty to the crown, no understanding of governance, no qualifications beyond parlor tricks and fortunate timing. How can you trust her with matters of state?" "I don't trust her," Riker said simply. "I trust her inability to lie convincingly. I trust that she physically cannot be controlled by the mechanisms we use to ensure loyalty. I trust that self-interest will keep her aligned with my survival, since without me, she'd be torn apart by people like you within the hour. Thessa's face went white. But most importantly, Riker continued, standing from his throne and descending the dais to stand beside Naira, I trust my own judgment, and I've judged that she's more valuable as an ally than as a corpse rotting in an unmarked grave. If any of you disagree, he smiled, and it was not kind. The door is behind you. Leave my court, leave my capital, leave my kingdom. I'll give you until sunset. No one moved. No one dared. Good. Riker turned to Naira, offering his arm with formal courtesy that didn't quite reach his eyes. Shall we discuss matters of state in private? The Council can entertain themselves with procedural nonsense while we address actual threats. Naira took his arm, feeling the strength beneath expensive fabric. Lead the way, Your Majesty. They walked out together through the stunned silence, leaving a room full of powerful people who'd just realized they were no longer the most dangerous things in the palace. Trati, Riker's private study was smaller than she'd expected. Books lining 3 walls, a desk covered in maps and reports, a single window overlooking the practice yards where soldiers trained in formations precise as clockwork. He closed the door behind them, locked it, then slumped against the wood like a puppet with cut strings. That was a disaster, he said. That was theater. Naira wandered over to examine the maps. You wanted them off balance, afraid, uncertain about what comes next. Mission accomplished. I just made you a target. I was already a target. Now I'm a target they can't kill without revealing themselves. She traced a finger along the northern border on the largest map. You also just told the entire court that my safety is tied to your authority. Anyone who moves against me undermines you. That's either brilliant or suicidal, depending on what happens next. What does happen next? Naira closed her eyes, sinking into the scene, but the futures were fragmented now, unstable. Too many variables shifting too fast. Every choice in the throne room had spawned new probabilities, new outcomes, new dangers. I can't see clearly anymore, she admitted. Too much chaos. Too many people making too many decisions all at once. The probability trees are collapsing into static. Is that normal? There's nothing normal about any of this. She opened her eyes to find him watching her with concern that looked genuine. But it means we're in freefall now. No predictions, no certainties, just... The window exploded inward, glass and wood and something moving too fast to track. Naira's body reacted before her mind caught up. She threw herself at Riker, knocking him sideways as a crossbow bolt buried itself in the wall where his head had been. They hit the floor hard, his weight on top of her, her dress torn, both of them breathing hard. Are you hurt? Riker demanded, hands already checking her for injuries. No. You? No. He rolled off her, moving to the shattered window in a combat crouch. Shooters gone. Professional work. They knew the sight lines, the guard rotations. The exact moment I'd be alone in here. Not alone. Naira stood, brushing glass from her ruined dress. Her heart hammered against her ribs. They didn't account for me being here. Because I didn't tell anyone you would be. Riker's expression had gone cold, calculating. Which means someone predicted my movements, knew I'd bring you here after the assembly, set up the shot in advance. Your counsel. Probably. He moved to his desk, pulling out parchment and ink. I'll have them arrested within the hour, questioned, executed, if necessary. No. He looked up sharply. No? That's what they want. You moving against them publicly, making yourself look paranoid and reactionary. It plays into the narrative they're building. Unstable king, corrupting influence, threat to the established order. Naira walked over to the window, careful of broken glass, examining the angle of the bolt's entry. This wasn't meant to kill you. Could have fooled me. Look at the trajectory. If you'd been standing alone, it would have missed high and right. But with me in the room, with the probability that I'd react to protect you, with the chaos of the assembly still fresh, she turned to face him. This was theater too. Their theater. Designed to make you seem vulnerable, make me seem like a liability, make your enemies think you're losing control. Riker stared at the bolt embedded in his wall. So what do? We don't react. We don't investigate. We don't give them the satisfaction of knowing it worked. Nira smiled, sharp and cold. We walk out of here like nothing happened. We attend dinner tonight. We show the entire court that we're not afraid, and we wait for them to make a real move. That's insane. That's strategy. They're testing your resolve, seeing if you'll flinch. If you do, they'll know they can manipulate you through me. But if you don't, she moved closer to him, deliberately invading his space. If you don't, they'll have to escalate, make a bigger mistake, give you legitimate grounds to move against them. You're asking me to use myself as bait. I'm asking you to trust that I can see far enough ahead to keep you alive. Nira reached up, straightening his collar where it had been pulled askew in the fall. 4 days until the real assassination attempt. This was just a warning shot, literally. His hands caught hers, holding them against his chest. And if you're wrong, if this was the attempt and they try again tonight, then we both die. And none of this matters anyway. She felt his heartbeat under her palms, rapid and strong. But I'm not wrong. I can feel the shape of what's coming, not clearly, not precisely, but enough to know we have time. How much time? Enough to change what happens next, if we're smart, if we're ruthless, if we're willing to sacrifice everything we thought we knew about how this ends. Riker pulled her closer, until they were pressed together amid broken glass and splintered wood and the ruins of safety. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can. I've never relied on anyone before, never trusted anyone with my survival. It goes against every instinct I have. I know. Nira rested her forehead against his. Do it anyway. His laugh was breathless. You're asking the impossible. That's kind of my specialty. He kissed her then, hard and desperate, and full of fear neither would acknowledge out loud. And she kissed him back, tasting blood and doubt, and the bitter edge of choices that couldn't be unmade. When they finally broke apart, both knew something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't strategy anymore. This wasn't manipulation or mutual advantage or political theater. This was two people standing at the edge of a cliff, holding hands, about to jump. We should go, Riker said, not moving. We should. Neither of them moved. Outside, the capital prepared for dinner. Guards changed shifts. Nobles dressed in their finest. Servants set tables with silver that would catch candlelight just right. And in a room that didn't exist, 3 council members received word that the assassination attempt had failed, that the healer had saved the king. Again. That their window of opportunity was closing, that desperate measures were now required. Severin set down his wineglass with hands that trembled slightly. We move tonight. Too risky, Merrick protested. Security will be... I don't care. Severin's voice carried absolute certainty. Every hour she remains alive is another hour she has to see us coming, another hour for the king to become more attached, another hour for our advantage to erode. He stood, straightening his robes. Tonight, during the dinner, while the entire court is watching them play at normalcy, that's when we strike. How? Thess asked. Severin smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd already made peace with damnation. We kill them both. The great hall glittered with enough wealth to feed a city for a year. Nobles draped in silks and jewels, tables groaning under the weight of elaborate dishes, musicians playing melodies designed to sound beautiful without being memorable. Nira sat at Riker's right hand, wearing a dress hastily repaired after the window incident, smile fixed in place like armor. She could feel them watching, every eye in the hall tracking her movements, calculating, judging, waiting for her to make a mistake that would justify their hatred. You're not eating, Riker murmured beside her. Neither are you. I'm the king. I'm allowed to be paranoid. He took a deliberate bite of roasted quail, demonstrating that the food wasn't poisoned. You need to at least pretend. Nira picked up her fork, moving vegetables around her plate in an approximation of eating. How long do we have to stay? Until the 7th course. Any earlier and it looks like we're fleeing. Any later and I'll start executing people out of boredom. Despite everything, she almost laughed. Across the table, Counselor Thess raised her wineglass in mock toast. To our new royal seer, may her tenure be exactly as long as she deserves. The threat in those words was crystal clear. Naira raised her own glass, meeting Tess's eyes without flinching. To the High Council, may their wisdom be matched only by their survival instinct. Several nobles choked on their wine. Riker's hand found hers under the table, squeezing once. Warning or support, she couldn't tell. The musicians shifted into a new melody. Servants cleared plates and brought the fifth course, something elaborate involving fish and saffron and edible gold leaf. Nira felt the future shift, not clearly, not precisely, just a sudden contraction of probability, like reality holding its breath. Something was about to happen. Riker, she said quietly. I feel it too. His hand tightened on hers. Everyone's too tense, too focused. This isn't normal dinner conversation. Nira scanned the hall. Nobles eating, servants moving, guards standing at attention. Everything looked perfectly there. A servant she didn't recognize. Young man, maybe 20, carrying a wine pitcher toward their table. His movements were too smooth, too professional, and his eyes held the flat certainty of someone who'd already accepted death. Riker, we need to... The servant stumbled. Wine splashed across the table, across Nira's dress, across Riker's hand. And in that wine, Naira saw futures collapse into a single point. Not poison. Contact agent, absorbed through skin. Riker had maybe 30 seconds before his heart stopped. Guards, she screamed, but her voice was drowned by sudden chaos. Nobles shouting, the servant running, Riker's hand already going numb in hers. She didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't weigh probabilities or measure outcomes. She just grabbed Riker's poisoned hand and pulled it to her mouth, sucking the wine-laced toxin from his skin, swallowing it before her mind could catch up with what her body had already decided. The poison hit her system like liquid fire. Riker was shouting something. Guards were grabbing the servant. The entire hall had erupted into pandemonium. But Naira was falling through probability itself, falling through every future she'd ever seen, falling into darkness that tasted like wine and felt like dying. The last thing she heard before consciousness fled was Riker's voice, raw with something that might have been terror or rage or grief. Don't you dare! Don't you fucking dare leave me now! Not after... But the darkness swallowed the rest, and Naira fell into a place where probability didn't exist, where futures couldn't be seen, where nothing remained except the cold certainty that she'd just made a choice neither of them could. Darkness tasted like copper and regret. Naira clawed her way back to consciousness through layers of pain thick enough to drown in. Her throat burned. Her chest felt like someone had replaced her lungs with broken glass. Every nerve ending screamed protest at the simple act of existing. But she was alive. Somehow, impossibly, she was alive. Her eyes cracked open to find stone ceiling instead of silk canopy, torchlight instead of morning sun, the smell of herbs and something sharper, medicinal compounds designed to counteract poisons that should have killed her 3 times over. Don't move. The voice came from her left. Familiar. Female. Not entirely friendly. Nira turned her head despite the warning, pain lancing through her skull. A woman sat in the shadows beyond the torchlight's reach. Dark robes, silver hair pulled back severe enough to hurt, face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile decades ago. Counselor Tess. Where? Naira's voice came out as gravel scraping against stone. She tried again. Where's Riker? Dealing with the aftermath of your dramatic sacrifice. Tess didn't move from her chair. You've been unconscious for 2 days. The poison you ingested would have killed a normal person in minutes. It took our best physicians working around the clock to keep you breathing long enough for your body to metabolize the toxin. 2 days. Ryra's mind reeled. 2 days closer to the real assassination attempt. 2 days of probabilities shifting without her able to see them. She tried to sit up. Her body informed her in excruciating detail that this was a terrible idea. I said don't move. Tess finally leaned forward into the light. Her expression was unreadable. Your internal organs are still recovering from chemical burns. Moving too quickly could rupture something vital. And while I'm certain His Majesty would be devastated by your death, I'd prefer not to deal with the paperwork. The casual cruelty in those words cut deeper than the poison had. Why are you here? Naira managed. Because the king is currently tearing his council chamber apart, looking for whoever ordered the assassination attempt. Because Severin is dead, executed in the throne room before witnesses for conspiracy and attempted regicide. Because Merrick has fled the capital with a price on his head large enough to buy a small kingdom. Thess's eyes were cold as winter stone. And because I'm the only council member left who's smart enough to know when to stay silent and wait. Wait for what? For you to wake up. For the king to calm down enough to think clearly. For the opportunity to explain exactly what you've done to this kingdom. Thess stood, moving to stand beside the bed where Naira lay broken and helpless. You saved his life. Again. Demonstrated loyalty beyond question. Proved that you're willing to die for him. Do you have any idea what that means? Nira's head swam, the room tilted. He trusts me now. Worse. Thess's smile was a razor's edge. He needs you. And a king who needs something is a king who can be controlled. Not by binding magic or formal oaths, but by something far more insidious. She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. Attachment, dependence, the absolute certainty that he cannot survive without you. You're wrong. Am I? In 2 days, he's purged half his council, tripled your security detail, and declared that anyone who even looks at you wrong will be executed for treason. He's not governing anymore. He's protecting. And protection is just control wearing a kinder mask. The words landed like physical blows, each one finding soft tissue between ribs. You wanted this, Nira said, fighting to keep her voice steady. You tried to kill me, twice, and now you're upset that I survived? I tried to kill you because I saw exactly what would happen if you lived. Thess straightened, composure settling back into place like armor. The most powerful man in the kingdom, compromised by something he can't control. It's not romantic. It's not poetic. It's a disaster waiting to collapse on all of us. Then why help keep me alive? Because dead, you're a martyr. Alive, you're a problem I can work with. Thess moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. The king will be here soon. He's barely left your side except when forced to handle executions and manhunts. When he arrives, he'll be relieved you're awake, grateful you survived, vulnerable in ways he doesn't understand yet. She looked back over her shoulder. Use that vulnerability wisely, girl, because right now you hold more power over this kingdom than any crown or army ever could, and power like that either saves everything, her expression went cold, or destroys it. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed in Naira's chest. Alone in the healing chamber, Naira closed her eyes and tried to sink into the scene, tried to map the probability trees that had shifted while she'd been unconscious, tried to find the paths forward that didn't end in blood and ash. But the futures wouldn't come. Her gift, the ability that had defined her entire existence, remained silent, not blocked, not suppressed, just absent, like trying to remember a word that sat just beyond reach, familiar and foreign all at once. The poison had done something to her, changed something fundamental in how she interfaced with probability itself. She was blind now. And the real assassination attempt was 2 days closer. Panic clawed at her throat. She forced it down, forced herself to breathe, forced herself to think through the implications. Without her sight, she couldn't protect Riker, couldn't see threats before they materialized, couldn't bend probability to keep him alive when the assassin finally struck. She'd saved him from poison only to leave him vulnerable to the blade she'd warned him about. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't absolutely terrifying. The door crashed open. Riker stood in the doorway like a man who'd forgotten how to stop moving. His formal coat was gone, shirt half unlaced, hair wild like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleep, abandoned in favor of vigil. He looked at her, just looked, and something in his expression made her chest ache worse than any poison. "You're awake," he said, voice rough with exhaustion or emotion or both. "Apparently." He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside her bed, like a man whose legs had given out. His hands found hers, gripping tight enough to hurt, checking her pulse against her wrist like he didn't trust his eyes. 2 days, he said. 2 days you've been dying by inches while physicians fed you compounds that might save you or might kill you faster. 2 days I've sat here watching you breathe and wondering if the next breath would be your last. I'm fine. You're not fine. Your kidneys failed twice. Your heart stopped once. You were clinically dead for 47 seconds while they pumped antitoxins directly into your chest cavity. His voice cracked. You were dead. And it was my fault. The poison was meant for you. The poison existed because I put you in a position where people wanted you dead. Because I used you as a weapon against my counsel. Because I was so goddamn arrogant I thought I could protect you just by declaring you under my authority. He pressed his forehead against her hand. I almost killed you. And the worst part is, I'd do it all again because I can't. He stopped, started over. I need you, and that makes me weak. And weakness in a king gets people killed. Nira felt something crack in her chest. Not physical, deeper. Riker, look at me. He raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, raw with an honesty she'd never seen from him before. I need to tell you something, she said, about the poison, about what it did. The physician said you'd recover fully, that within a week you'd be back to, my gift is gone. The words fell between them like stones into still water. Riker went very still. What? I can't see anymore. Can't feel probabilities shifting. Can't predict outcomes or bend reality towards specific futures. Whatever that poison did, it burned out the part of me that could see beyond the present moment. She forced herself to hold his gaze. I'm blind. And in 2 days, that assassin I warned you about is still coming, and I have no idea how to stop it anymore. The silence that followed was terrible. 2 days, Riker repeated slowly. You warned me about an assassination attempt in 4 days. You've been unconscious for 2, which means tomorrow night, maybe the night after. I don't know exactly. I never knew exactly. I just saw the probability of it, the shape of how it would happen. And now I can't see anything. Her hands tightened on his. I can't protect you, can't warn you, can't do the one thing I promised I could do. She expected anger, accusation, the cold withdrawal of a man who'd invested in an asset that had just proven worthless. Instead, Riker laughed. It was a broken sound, desperate, edged with something that might have been relief if relief made any sense in this context. You're telling me, he said, that you lost the ability that made you valuable to my kingdom, irreplaceable to my strategy, and the only reason I kept you alive instead of executing you as a threat. And you think I'm going to be upset about that? Nira stared at him. Yes, you're an idiot. He stood abruptly, pacing the small chamber like a caged wolf. For 2 days, I've watched you dying because you saved me, because you made a choice that should have killed you to protect someone you barely know. And all I could think about was how utterly stupid I'd been. I don't understand. I never wanted your gift. The words came out harsh, raw. I wanted you. The person who couldn't be controlled, who spoke truth without fear, who looked at me like I was just a man instead of a crown and 3 centuries of absolute authority. He stopped pacing, turned to face her. Your ability to see the future? That was just the excuse I used to keep you close without admitting I wanted you close. And now it's gone, and you're still here, and He stopped, ran both hands through his hair, looked lost in a way she'd never seen him look before. I don't know how to do this, he said finally. Don't know how to be this. I'm a king. I don't need people. I use them. And when they stop being useful, I discard them. That's how I've survived. That's how I've ruled. But with you, stop. Nira's voice came out sharper than intended. Just stop. You don't get to do this. Don't get to stand there and confess feelings like we're normal people in a normal situation when everything about this is broken. Riker flinched like she'd struck him. Tess was here, Nira continued, pain in her chest building with every word. Before you arrived. She told me what you've been doing, the executions, the purges, the manhunts. You're tearing your kingdom apart because I almost died. And that's not love. That's not protection. That's obsession. And obsession is just another kind of control. That's not fair, isn't it? You said it yourself. You need me. And the second you need something, you consume it, own it, control it until there's nothing left but the shape of what you wanted it to be. She forced herself to sit up despite the agony it caused, needing to meet his eyes on level ground. I came here because I thought maybe, just maybe, I could be around someone powerful without becoming their possession. But you've already started remaking me into something you can keep. I haven't touched your choices. You made me royal seer, put me in a position where my survival depends on your protection. Created a situation where leaving you means death because your enemies will hunt me the second I'm not under your authority. Nira's laugh was bitter. You've built a cage so elegant, I didn't notice the bars until I was already locked inside. Riker's jaw clenched. What do you want me to do? Apologize for keeping you alive, for valuing you enough to burn down anyone who threatens you? I want you to let me go. The words hung between them like an execution sentence. No. His voice went flat. Absolute. No. We're 2 days from an assassination attempt. Your gift may be gone, but someone still wants me dead, and you're staying here where I can protect you until Until what? Until you've killed everyone who might be a threat? Until you've consolidated enough power that no one dares question your attachment to me? Until you've turned this kingdom into exactly the kind of tyranny you claim to be preventing? You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. You're so terrified of losing control that you'll sacrifice everything, including the person you claim to care about, to maintain it. Nira swung her legs over the side of the bed, ignoring her body's screaming protest. But I'm done being controlled. By you, by your council, by anyone who thinks they get to decide what I am and where I belong. She stood. The room tilted dangerously. She grabbed the bed frame to stay upright. Riker moved toward her instinctively. You're going to hurt yourself. Don't touch me. The command in her voice stopped him mid-step. Don't you dare touch me like you have the right. Not anymore. Nira, I saved your life twice. I've earned the right to walk away if I choose. So here's my choice. I'm leaving. Tonight. Before your paranoia gets more people killed. Before I become so tangled in your need for control that I forget I was ever free. Riker's expression went cold. The mask of absolute authority settling back into place like armor he'd briefly forgotten he was wearing. You walk out that door, he said quietly, and you're dead by morning. My enemies will hunt you. My allies will betray you. And without your gift to see them coming, you won't last a week. Then I'll die free. Better than living as your kept thing. That's not what you are, isn't it? Tell me honestly. If I'd never had the ability to see the future, would you have let me stay? Or would I be in a dungeon right now waiting for execution as an uncontrolled magical threat? The silence was answer enough. Nira laughed, and the sound carried all the bitterness of betrayed hope. That's what I thought. She moved toward the door. Each step felt like walking through fire, but she forced herself forward through sheer stubbornness. If you leave, Riker said behind her, voice dropping to something dangerous, I will hunt you. I will find you, and I will drag you back here in chains if necessary, because I am not letting you throw your life away out of misplaced pride. Nira stopped at the threshold, hand on the doorframe. Didn't turn around. You can't chain me, remember? That's the whole reason this started. I exist outside your control. Then I'll find another way. I always do. Now she turned, looked at him across the small chamber that suddenly felt vast as kingdoms. You know what the saddest part of this is? She said. For a moment, one brief, stupid moment, I actually believed you might be different. That you might see me as something more than a tool or a threat or a problem to solve. But you're exactly like everyone else who's ever had power over others. You just hide it better. That's not true. Prove it. Let me walk out that door. Let me choose to leave without consequence or punishment or threats. Show me you value my autonomy more than your need to possess things you can't control. Riker stared at her. Something warred in his expression, desire and duty and desperation all fighting for dominance. Finally, he stepped aside. Go, he said, voice empty. Walk out. Prove to yourself that freedom matters more than survival. And when you're bleeding out in some alley because you chose pride over pragmatism, remember this moment. Nira felt something break in her chest, some last hope she'd been carrying that maybe, just maybe, he'd surprise her. But kings didn't surprise anyone. They only ever met expectations. She walked out without another word. The hallways of the palace felt different at night, shadows deeper, silence heavier. Every torch seemed to mark territory she no longer had permission to cross. Nira made it 3 corridors before the dizziness hit hard enough to drop her to her knees. She pressed her forehead against cold stone, breathing through waves of nausea, while her body reminded her in excruciating detail that she'd been clinically dead 47 seconds ago. Footsteps approached from behind. Not guards. Wrong rhythm. Too light. She forced herself to look up. Counselor Thess stood over her, expression unreadable in the torchlight. "That went about as well as expected," the old woman said, "though I'm impressed you made it this far before collapsing. The physician said you wouldn't be able to walk for another day at least." "What do you want?" Naira managed through gritted teeth. "To offer you a choice. A real one, not the false binary the king just presented. I'm not interested in joining your conspiracy. I don't have a conspiracy anymore. Severin is dead. Merrick is exiled. I'm the last member of the High Council who remembers what it was like before Riker Voss consolidated absolute power." Thess crouched down to Naira's level, joints creaking. "And I'm offering you information. Freely. No strings attached." "Why?" "Because you were right earlier. About cages with elegant bars. About obsession disguised as protection. About kings who consume everything they claim to value." Thess's expression softened fractionally. "I've watched Riker grow from an angry prince into an absolute monarch. Watched him build systems of control so comprehensive that even he's trapped inside them now. And I hoped, that maybe you could break through that. Make him remember he's human before his humanity gets completely buried under duty and paranoia. I failed. No, you revealed the truth, that he's so afraid of losing control that he'll sabotage anything that threatens his authority, including his own heart." Thess stood slowly, offering a hand. "The question is what you do with that revelation." Naira stared at the offered hand, thought about refusing it, thought about crawling to freedom on her own terms even if it killed her. Then she thought about Riker, alone in his throne room, surrounded by power that had stopped meaning anything. She took Thess's hand. The old woman pulled her upright with surprising strength. "There's something you should know about the assassination attempt you warned him about. My gift is gone. I can't see it anymore." "You don't need to see it. I can tell you exactly what's going to happen." Thess's eyes were hard as winter stone. "Because I'm the one who ordered it." The world tilted. Naira's mind reeled, trying to process the words while her body fought to stay conscious. "You what?" "The poison was meant to kill you both. When it failed, I activated a secondary plan. An assassin who's been embedded in the palace guard for 3 years. Someone Riker trusts implicitly. Someone who has access to his chambers, his routines, his vulnerabilities." Thess's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Tomorrow night, that assassin will inject poison directly into his neck while he sleeps, and Riker will die. And the kingdom will finally be free of a tyrant too powerful to be challenged through conventional means." "You're insane. I'm practical. Riker Voss has become what we feared most, a ruler whose power has no limits and whose paranoia has no end. He executed Severin without trial, exiled Merrick without evidence. He's torn apart the governing structure of this kingdom because one woman he barely knows almost died." Thess gripped Naira's shoulders. "That's not leadership. That's madness. And madness in a king destroys everything. I won't let you kill him. You can't stop me. Your gift is gone. Your body is broken. And you just walked away from the one person who might have protected you." Thess smiled, and it was almost pitying. "But I'll offer you a deal. Walk away. Tonight. Leave the capital. Disappear into whatever hole you crawled out of, and I'll make his death quick, painless. He'll simply not wake up tomorrow. No suffering, no fear. Just a quiet end to a reign that spiraled beyond redemption. And if I refuse, then I'll make it hurt. I'll make sure he knows it's coming. I'll let him feel every second of the poison working through his system. I'll let him die knowing that his need to control everything is what got him killed." The old woman's expression went cold. "The choice is yours. Save yourself or make his death agonizing. Either way, by dawn after tomorrow, Riker Voss will be gone." Naira's mind raced. Without her gift, she couldn't see the probabilities, couldn't map the outcomes, couldn't bend reality toward the future where Riker survived. But she could choose, could decide what mattered more, freedom or loyalty, pride or love, self-preservation or sacrifice. "Tell me who the assassin is," she said. Tess studied her. Why would I do that? Because you want me gone. Want me to walk away and let this happen. But I need to know who I'm protecting him from. Need to understand the threat completely before I make my choice. Nira forced herself to stand straighter despite the agony. Tell me, and I'll consider your offer. The lie came easily, smoothly, without a single tell to give away her real intention. Tess considered for a long moment. Then she leaned in close, breath cold against Nira's ear. Commander Holt, captain of the Palace Guard, war hero, Riker's most trusted military advisor. Her whisper carried the weight of betrayal. He's been on my payroll since before Riker took the throne. Tomorrow night, during the third watch, he'll enter the King's chambers to deliver a routine security report. And while Riker reads it, Holt will inject poison into his neck with a needle hidden in his uniform cuff. Death in seconds. No struggle, no warning. She pulled back, searching Nira's face. Now you know. Now you can choose. Save yourself or die trying to save a man who sees you as property he can't bear to lose. Nira swayed on her feet, vision blurring at the edges. I need to think. You have until sunrise. After that, I leave the capital to establish an alibi, and Holt moves into position. Tess turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You're not like the others who've tried to get close to him. You actually saw him as human. That's rare. Almost precious, which is exactly why you can't stay. Because the moment he started seeing you as necessary instead of interesting, he stopped being human and became the monster we both know he's capable of being. She walked away into the darkness, leaving Nira alone with the truth. Not the truth about the assassination, the truth about herself. She'd come to the capital to stop being alone, to find someone who could exist beside her without trying to control or consume her. And for a brief moment, she'd thought Riker might be that person. But Tess was right. He was a king, and kings only knew how to possess or destroy. There was no third option. Nira pressed her back against the wall, slid down until she was sitting on cold stone, and forced herself to think through the impossible choice in front of her. She could run, save herself, let the assassination happen and start over somewhere far from kingdoms and crowns and men who needed to control everything they touched. Or she could go back. Warn Riker, expose Commander Holt, save a man who'd just proven he valued ownership more than autonomy, freedom or loyalty, self-preservation or sacrifice. The girl she'd been a week ago would have run without looking back. But that girl had never kissed a king, had never felt what it was like to be seen, truly seen, by someone powerful enough to have anything but choosing you anyway, had never understood that sometimes love wasn't gentle or kind or selfless. Sometimes it was just two broken people standing in ruins they'd made together, deciding if rebuilding was worth the cost. Nira pulled herself to her feet. Her body screamed protest. Her mind insisted this was suicide. Every instinct she'd honed over years of survival demanded she run. But she turned back toward Riker's chambers anyway. Not because she'd forgiven him, not because she trusted him, not because she believed this would end in anything but blood and ash, but because some choices mattered more than survival. And saving someone who'd almost learned to see you as human instead of tool was one of them, even if it killed her, especially if it killed her. She made it halfway to the royal wing before the second wave of poison hit her system. Delayed reaction the physicians had warned might happen. Her legs gave out. Her vision went white, and she fell into darkness thinking that maybe Tess had been right all along. Maybe some cages were too beautiful to escape. Maybe some kings were too broken to save. Maybe some choices led only to. Nira woke to hands on her shoulders and a voice she didn't recognize calling her name like a prayer or a curse. Miss Solon? Miss Solon, can you hear me? She forced her eyes open. A young guard crouched over her, face pale with fear. Behind him, two more stood with hands on sword hilts, uncertain whether she was threat or victim. How long? Her voice cracked. She tried again. How long was I out? Don't know, miss. Found you collapsed in the east corridor maybe 5 minutes ago. Should we fetch the physicians? No. Nira grabbed his arm, pulling herself upright despite every muscle screaming protest. What time is it? Near midnight, miss. Midnight, which meant she had hours before sunrise. Hours before Tess left to establish her alibi. Hours before Commander Holt made his move during the third watch. If Tess had been telling the truth, If this wasn't another layer of manipulation designed to keep Naira running in circles while the real threat materialized from a different direction entirely. "Help me up," she said. The guard hesitated. "Miss, you're bleeding." "I know. Help me anyway." He did, careful and afraid in equal measure. Once vertical, Naira assessed the damage. Blood from where she'd bitten through her lip during the fall. More blood from her nose. Probably the poison reaction the physicians had warned about. Her dress was ruined beyond repair, dark fabric hiding most of the stains, but not all of them. She looked like she'd lost a fight. Perfect. "Take me to the king's chambers," she said. The guards exchanged glances. "Miss, His Majesty gave explicit orders not to be disturbed. Then he can be angry at me for disobeying, but I need to see him. Now." They moved through the palace in silence, Naira forcing herself to walk without stumbling despite her body's insistence that lying down and dying would be vastly preferable. Every step hurt, every breath was work. But she'd come too far to collapse now. The thought of Riker alone in his chambers, unaware that someone close to him was planning murder, drove her forward when instinct screamed to stop. They reached the royal wing faster than Naira was ready for. Massive doors carved with scenes of conquest and triumph. 2 guards flanking the entrance, alert despite the late hour. One of them stepped forward as Naira approached. "Miss Solon, His Majesty left orders." "I know, not to be disturbed. This is an emergency." "What kind of emergency?" "The kind where he dies if I don't speak with him immediately." The guards exchanged glances. Years of training warring with direct orders from their king. Finally, one knocked. "Your Majesty, Royal Seer requests urgent audience." Silence from inside. Then Riker's voice, muffled by thick wood. "Tell her to leave." "Sire, she claims it's an emergency. I don't care if the kingdom is burning. Tell her to leave." Naira pushed past the guard, putting her hand on the door. "Riker, please, someone's planning to kill you tonight. I have information. I need—" The door opened so fast she almost fell forward. Riker stood in the doorway wearing only trousers and an unbuttoned shirt. His hair was wild, eyes red like he'd been drinking or crying or both, and the expression on his face when he saw her was equal parts fury and relief. "You came back," he said. "I never left the palace. You walked away from me. You made your choice." "I made a stupid choice. Can we discuss my poor decision-making after I prevent your murder?" Something cracked in his expression. "You're bleeding again." "Poison relapse. The physicians warned it might happen. Not important right now. Everything about you is important right now." He grabbed her arm, pulled her inside, slammed the door on the startled guards. 2 hours. I've spent 2 hours sitting in the dark wondering if you'd already fled the capital. If I'd ever see you again. If the last words between us would be accusations and ultimatums. "Riker," I was wrong. The words came out raw, unpracticed, like he'd never said them before in his life. "About everything. You were right. I was building a cage, calling it protection because that sounded noble instead of possessive, and I don't know how to stop. Don't know how to want something without trying to own it. But I'm trying to learn, Commander Holt is going to kill you." That stopped him cold. "What?" "Or he isn't, and Counselor Thess is manipulating me into accusing him so her real assassin can strike while we're distracted. I can't tell which. My gift is gone and I'm making decisions blind, and everything could be a lie." The words tumbled out faster than thought. "Thess found me in the hallway, told me she'd ordered your assassination, said Holt was her agent, gave me details about how he'd do it, poison needle hidden in his uniform, third watch, while delivering a security report. But it could all be misdirection, could be designed to make me paranoid and useless, while the real threat comes from somewhere else entirely." Riker listened without interrupting, expression shifting from confusion to fury to something like calculation. When she finally ran out of words, he moved to his desk, pulled out a small crystal vial. "Drink this," he said. "What is it?" "Antitoxin, broader spectrum than what the physicians gave you. It'll stop the poison relapse and clear your system enough to think straight." He pressed it into her hand. "And then, we're going to systematically solve this problem the way we should have from the beginning." Nira drank. The liquid tasted like copper and mint and burned all the way down. But within seconds, her head started to clear. The nausea receded. Pain became manageable instead of overwhelming. Better? Riker asked. Yes. How did you... I've been poisoned 6 times. You learned to keep remedies close. He moved to his wardrobe, pulling out a coat and weapons belt. Now, let's address the facts. Tess approached you, confessed to ordering my assassination, and named Holt as her agent. That's either truth or manipulation. Either way, it tells us something. That she wants me to suspect Holt. Exactly, which means either he's guilty and she's trying to expose him through you, or he's innocent and she's using him as a distraction. Riker strapped on the weapons belt with practiced efficiency. The question is which scenario we're dealing with, and we can't know without testing it. How do we test it without getting you killed? We set a trap. Force whoever's planning to strike into making their move under controlled conditions. His smile was sharp as broken glass. And we do it now, before they're ready, before they expect us to act. Neera's blood went cold. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to control the battlefield instead of waiting for my enemies to choose when and where to strike. There's a difference. He checked the blades at his belt, movements efficient as breathing. If Holt's the threat, we confront him directly. If he's innocent, his reaction will tell us. And either way, we force Thess's hand. This is insane. This is pragmatic. We have hours before the third watch, hours to prepare, hours to stack the odds in our favor instead of waiting for an assassin to catch us sleeping. Riker turned to face her fully. Unless you have a better plan. Neera's mind raced. Without her gift, she couldn't predict outcomes, couldn't see which path led to survival and which to disaster. All she had was logic and instinct and a desperate hope that she wasn't about to get him killed. But doing nothing meant waiting for death to arrive on its own schedule. At least this way they chose the terms. What did you have in mind? She asked. We summon Holt. Tell him you've regained consciousness and made serious accusations against him. Watch his reaction. If he's guilty, he'll either confess, flee, or try something desperate. If he's innocent, he'll demand answers and help us identify the real threat. Riker's eyes gleamed with something dangerous. Either way, we get information, and information is the only weapon we have right now. And if he tries to kill you the moment he walks through that door, then you'll be behind him with a loaded crossbow aimed at his spine. 3rd drawer of my desk, already loaded. Don't hesitate if he makes a move. The casual way he said it sent ice through her veins. I've never killed anyone. You drank poison meant for a king. You've already crossed harder lines than pulling a trigger. He moved closer, hands finding her shoulders. I need you sharp right now. Not gentle, not hesitant. If Holt is the threat and you freeze, we both die. Can you do this? Neera looked into his eyes and saw the truth he wasn't saying. This wasn't just about catching an assassin. This was about trust, about whether she'd stand beside him when death came calling or run to save herself, about whether they were partners or just 2 people who'd briefly orbited each other before gravity pulled them apart. Yes, she said. I can do this. Good. He kissed her once, hard and fast. Get the crossbow. Take position by the window where the shadows will hide you. And remember, if he moves wrong, shoot first. Apologize later if we were mistaken. Neera retrieved the crossbow, testing its weight. The wood was worn smooth from use, the string taut and ready. This wasn't a ceremonial weapon. This was a tool designed to kill efficiently. She moved to the window, positioning herself where darkness would hide her, but she could still see the entire room. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't be the weak point. Riker moved to the door, opened it, spoke to the guards outside. Fetch Commander Holt. Tell him I require immediate briefing on security matters related to Miss Solin's accusations. Not a request. I want him here within 10 minutes. The guards saluted and left, clearly uncomfortable but obedient. Riker closed the door, turned to face Neera across the dimly lit chamber. Last chance to reconsider this absolutely terrible idea. You first. Not happening. Then neither am I. They waited in silence, tension building with every passing second. Neera's finger rested near the crossbow's trigger, muscle memory from a childhood spent hunting game in forests that seemed impossibly far from marble halls and political murder. Every outcome she could imagine branched through her mind in crude imitation of the gift she'd lost. Holt arrives innocent, and they've just destroyed trust with their best military commander. Holt arrives guilty and makes his move, and she has to kill him before he kills Riker. Holt doesn't arrive at all because he's already fled and they've lost their best lead. The door doesn't open and an assassin comes through the window instead. Every scenario ended in blood, but at least they'd chosen whose blood to risk. Footsteps in the corridor, heavy, measured, military precision. A knock. "Enter," Riker said, voice steady despite the death trap they'd just created. The door opened. Commander Holt stepped through, taking in the scene with a soldier's assessment. Riker standing in the center of the room, armed but not aggressive, the tension thick enough to taste. Something wrong in the air that years of combat had taught him to recognize. His eyes swept the chamber, paused on the window where Nira's silhouette was barely visible in shadow. "Your Majesty," Holt said carefully. "You summoned me for a briefing?" "I did. Close the door." Holt did, movement slow and deliberate. His right hand drifted toward his sword hilt, stopped halfway. Not quite a threatening gesture, but not entirely innocent either. "What's this about?" he asked. "Miss Solon believes you're planning to assassinate me tonight. I'd like to hear your response to that accusation, in detail." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Holt laughed. It was a genuine sound, surprised and almost wounded. "That's absurd," he said. "Your Majesty, I've served you for 18 years. Fought beside you in the border wars, took an arrow meant for you at Greystone Pass and damn near lost my arm. The idea that I'd betray you now is—" He shook his head. "It's insane." "Is it? Because Counselor Thess told Miss Solon that you've been on her payroll since before I took the throne, that you're planning to inject poison via a needle hidden in your uniform, that the assassination is scheduled for tonight during the third watch." Riker's voice was flat, clinical. "Those are specific accusations from a council member who's already proven willing to commit murder. So I'll ask you plainly, are you planning to kill me?" "No." The word came out hard, definitive. "On my honor, on 18 years of service, on the blood I've shed for this kingdom, no. I am not now, nor have I ever been, planning your assassination." "Show me your uniform," Nira said from the shadows. Holt turned to face her voice. "Excuse me? If there's no needle hidden in your cuffs or collar, show us. Prove Thess was lying." "This is ridiculous." "It's a simple request," Riker said quietly. "Remove your uniform coat. Let us examine it. If you're innocent, you have nothing to hide." Holt's jaw clenched. For a moment, Nira thought he might refuse, might demand proper procedure or royal warrants, or the dignity of his rank. Instead, he unbuttoned his coat with sharp, angry movements, removed it, held it out toward Riker. "Check it yourself. Every seam, every pocket, every goddamn thread. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find." Riker took the coat, examined it thoroughly, ran fingers along seams, checked pockets, tested the weight for hidden compartments. Nothing. He handed it back. "Your shirt cuffs." "For the love of—" "Fine." Holt unbuttoned his sleeves, rolled them back to reveal scarred forearms. No needles, no hidden weapons, just old wounds from a career spent fighting. "Satisfied?" The bitterness in his voice cut like glass. "No," Nira said, stepping out of the shadows. "Because Thess could have lied about the method, could have given me false details to make me doubt the broader accusation, or you could have disposed of the weapon the moment you heard I was awake and asking questions. Then what will satisfy you? A confession to crimes I haven't committed? My resignation? My execution?" Holt's voice rose, anger finally breaking through military discipline. "I've given everything to this kingdom, everything, and now I'm being interrogated like a common criminal because a council member who tried to have you both killed decided to throw my name into the fire before fleeing." "She didn't flee," Nira said. "She told me she'd leave at sunrise to establish an alibi. Before that, she's still in the capital." Riker's eyes sharpened. "Where in the capital?" "She didn't say, but she was confident, calm, like someone who'd already won." Nira moved closer to Holt, studying his expression. "You're right that the accusations sound absurd. That's what makes them effective. If I'm wrong, I've destroyed your reputation. If I'm right, you're already planning how to finish this. I'm not planning anything except how to rebuild trust that you've just shattered." Holt looked at Riker. "Your Majesty, please. Think about this logically. If I wanted you dead, I've had 1,000 opportunities. Private meetings, sparring sessions, times when you were vulnerable and alone and trusting. Why would I wait until now? Why would I act when suspicion is highest and security is tightest? Because Tess is forcing your hand, Naira said. Her co-conspirators are dead or exiled. She's running out of time and options, so she's activating assets she'd planned to save for later, burning you to accomplish what she couldn't through other means. That's speculation. It's pattern recognition. And patterns are all I have left since the poison destroyed my gift. Holt went very still. Your gift is gone. Completely. I can't see probabilities anymore. Can't predict outcomes. Can't tell truth from lies. Nira's smile was bitter. Which means I'm operating on instinct and desperation. So if I'm wrong about you, Commander, I apologize in advance. But I'd rather insult an innocent man than let a guilty one kill the king. Fair enough. Holt's posture shifted, tension draining out of his shoulders. Then let me help you find the real threat. Because if Tess did activate an agent tonight, if someone is planning to strike during the third watch, we have... He glanced at the window where moonlight indicated time passing. Less than 2 hours to identify and stop them. You're offering to help investigate yourself? Riker asked. I'm offering to help protect you from whoever Tess actually sent, because that's my job. My duty. The only thing I've ever cared about. Holt met Riker's eyes. You can trust me or not. You can keep that crossbow trained on my back or lower it. But either way, let me do what I was trained to do. Keep you alive. Naira looked at Riker. He looked back, silent question in his expression. Do we trust him? She didn't know. Her gift was gone. Her instincts were screaming contradictions. Every logical argument could be flipped to support the opposite conclusion. But Holt was right about one thing. They had less than 2 hours. Fine, Riker said. You help us investigate. But Naira keeps the crossbow. And if you make one move that looks threatening, she puts a bolt through your spine. Understood? Understood. Holt pulled his coat back on, buttoning it with quick efficiency. Where do we start? Tess said her agent had been embedded in the palace guard for 3 years, Nira said. Someone with access to your schedules and security protocols. Someone who could move through restricted areas without raising suspicion. That describes half my staff. Holt's expression went thoughtful. But 3 years is specific. Let me think about who joined around that time frame. He moved to Riker's desk, pulled out parchment, started writing names. Lieutenant Garrett transferred from the border garrison 3 years ago. Sergeant Mira joined after her husband died in service. Corporal Vex came up through the city guard. Wait, Nira interrupted. Garrett, what does he do? He's my aide, handles paperwork, coordinates, schedules, manages the duty rosters. Holt looked up. Why? Because an aide would have perfect access, would know your movements, your routines, where you'd be and when, could plant evidence or weapons and make it look like you did it, could move through the palace using your authority as cover. Nira's heart started racing. Where is he right now? On patrol. The Royal Wing, I think. He took the third watch rotation. The Royal Wing. The third watch. Exactly when Tess said the assassination would happen. Exactly where Riker was standing. He's already in position, Nira whispered. Holt's face went pale. No, Garrett wouldn't. He's been loyal, efficient, never given me reason to... Neither had you until 20 minutes ago, according to Tess's accusations, Riker cut in. If she's playing us, if she's been building Garrett as her weapon while using you as the distraction... The window exploded inward. Glass and wood, and a figure moving impossibly fast through the opening, crossbow bolt whistling past Riker's head, missing by inches. A second figure dropping from the ceiling where they'd apparently been clinging to the rafters. 2 assassins. Not one. Naira fired her crossbow at the window threat. The bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways but not dropping him. He landed in a roll, came up with a blade in each hand, smile vicious under a dark hood. The ceiling assassin landed behind Holt, knife already moving toward his spine. Holt twisted, faster than a man his age should move, caught the knife hand and broke it with a sickening crack. The assassin screamed, tried to disengage. Riker's sword was already out, already moving, already cutting through the space where the window assassin had been a heartbeat before. Chaos erupted. The window assassin was young, fast, trained for close-quarters murder. He moved like water, flowing around Riker's attacks, looking for openings that didn't exist because Riker had been fighting since before this killer was born. The ceiling assassin recovered despite the broken hand, drew a second knife with the other, went for Holt's throat with desperate speed. Naira dropped the crossbow, grabbed a decorative sword from the wall display, had no idea how to use it properly, but threw herself at the ceiling assassin anyway, because Holt was trying to protect Riker, and that meant protecting Holt. Her blade caught the assassin's knife, deflected it enough that it scored Holt's shoulder instead of his throat. The commander grunted, spun, drove his elbow into the assassin's face with bone-crushing force. The assassin dropped. Meanwhile, Riker and the window killer danced through the chamber in a blur of steel and murder. The assassin was good, professionally trained, knew exactly where to strike to kill quickly. But Riker was better. His blade found the assassin's wrist, severed tendons, sent one knife clattering away. The assassin cursed, grabbed for something at his belt. Poison vial. Suicide before capture. Riker's boot caught to the assassin's hand before the vial reached his mouth. Glass shattered, poison sprayed across expensive carpet. The assassin was on his knees now, one hand useless, the other pinned under Riker's boot. Death by information extraction infinitely worse than poison. "Who sent you?" Riker's voice was cold as winter stone. The assassin spat blood. "Go to hell." "Already there. Answer the question or I start removing fingers." "Riker," Naira said quietly. "The ceiling one is still breathing." Holt was already binding that assassin with torn bedsheets, working efficiently, despite blood running from his shoulder. "This one's not going anywhere, and they're both wearing guild marks." "What guild?" Riker pressed his boot down harder, grinding broken glass into the assassin's trapped hand. "The Shadows of Terran," Holt said grimly. "Professional killers out of the eastern provinces. They don't take contracts from anyone with less than royal gold to pay them." "So someone with serious resources wanted me dead." Riker looked down at the assassin pinned beneath his boot. "Which council member hired you? Thess? Merrick? Someone else?" The assassin laughed, bitter and broken. "You think we'd tell you even if we knew? Contracts are anonymous. Payments already made. Whether we succeed or die, the gold's already spent." "Then you're useless." Riker's sword moved toward the assassin's throat. "Wait," Nira said. Everyone looked at her. They came through the window and the ceiling, two different entry points, professional coordination, which means they've been watching this room for days at least, planning the attack, waiting for the right moment. She moved closer to the window, examining the shattered frame. "But we only summoned Holt 20 minutes ago. We didn't know we'd be in this room until you opened the door. So how did they know to be in position?" Silence. Then Holt's expression changed. "They didn't. They were already here, already set up, already waiting for the third watch," Nira finished. "They were waiting for the time Thess told me the assassination would happen, which means she wasn't lying about the timing, just about who the assassin was." "She set us up," Riker said quietly. "Gave you information specific enough to sound credible. Named Holt to create suspicion and confusion. Knew you'd warn me, knew we'd investigate, knew we'd gather in this room trying to solve the puzzle." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "And while we were focused on Holt, her real killers got into position." "Correction," Holt said. "One of her real killers, plural, because Garrett is still out there, still on patrol, still positioned in the royal wing." Naira's blood went cold. This was the distraction. These two were meant to keep us busy while... The door burst open. Guards poured in, weapons drawn, called by the sound of fighting. Behind them, pushed forward by armored hands, stumbled a young man in officer's uniform. Lieutenant Garrett. His face was bruised, hands bound behind his back, and in his eyes, Nira saw the flat certainty of someone who'd already accepted death. "Found this one lurking outside your Majesty's chambers," the lead guard reported. "Had poison and a needle on him. Says he was acting under orders from Commander Holt." Every eye in the room turned to Holt. The commander stood very still, blood dripping from his shoulder. Expression shifting from confusion to realization to absolute fury. "That's a lie," he said. "Is it?" Garrett's voice was steady despite the bruises. "You told me the king had to die, that he'd become a tyrant, that removing him was the only way to save the kingdom from collapsing into paranoid chaos. You gave me the poison. You positioned me for tonight's strike. I did nothing of the sort." Holt moved toward his former aide, murder in his eyes. "I've never spoken a treasonous word in my life, and you know it." "Then explain the note." Garrett jerked his head toward the guards. One of them produced a folded parchment, handed it to Riker. The king read it, expression darkening with each line. "This is your handwriting," he said to Holt. "Let me see it." Holt grabbed the note, scanned it, went pale. "This is, someone forged this, used my hand to—" He looked at Garrett. "How long have you been working for Thess?" "Since the day I joined your staff." "Since before that, really." "She recruited me from the border garrison specifically to get close to you, to study your patterns, to wait for the perfect moment." Garrett's smile was bitter. "And you made it so easy. Trusted me with everything. Never questioned. Never suspected." "You're lying to save yourself, but—" "Am I? Or am I telling the truth because I've already failed and there's no point protecting anyone anymore?" Garrett looked at Riker. "She promised me a pardon if I cooperated, promised me freedom if I testified against Holt. Is that offer still good?" "No," Riker said flatly. "Didn't think so." Garrett slumped. "Then at least let it be quick." "Not until you tell me everything. Every conversation with Thess, every instruction, every piece of this conspiracy." Riker's voice carried absolute authority. "You talk. You live. In a cell. Forever. But you live. You stay silent, and I hand you to Holt to do with as he pleases." Holt's expression was murder incarnate. Garrett swallowed hard. "She's in the old watchtower, east side of the palace grounds, waiting for confirmation that you're dead before she flees the capital. She has horses ready, supplies, enough gold to disappear forever. How many others are working for her? Just me and the guild killers. She didn't trust anyone else. Said the fewer people involved, the fewer could betray her. And the note? The forged orders? She had a scribe who specialized in copying handwriting, paid him to replicate Holt's hand perfectly, then killed him to keep him quiet." Garrett looked at the floor. "She was thorough, ruthless, everything a successful conspiracy requires." "Except success," Naira said quietly. Garrett's laugh was hollow. "Yeah, except that." Riker gestured to the guards. "Take him to the deepest cell we have. No visitors, no communication. And if he so much as thinks about escaping, kill him." They dragged Garrett away. The bound assassins followed, unconscious or close enough not to matter. Alone now except for Holt, Riker turned to Naira. "The watchtower," he said. "We end this tonight. She'll have defenses, escape routes, more killers if we're unlucky." Naira's hands were shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. "This could be another trap." "Probably is." Riker cleaned his sword on a torn piece of tapestry. "But we go anyway because I'm done reacting, done defending, done letting other people choose when and where to strike. She's expecting confirmation of your death. If we give her what she expects, make her think the assassination succeeded, she might let her guard down." Naira's mind raced through possibilities even without her gift to guide her. "We send a message. Tell her the king is dead. Killed by guild assassins while Holt and I died trying to defend him. She thinks she's won and comes out of hiding to claim victory. And we're waiting for her," Riker finished. "It's risky. Everything about tonight has been risky. At least this way we control the deception." He looked at Holt. "Can you sell it? Make the guards think I'm dead long enough to draw Thess out?" "I can try." Holt pressed a hand to his bleeding shoulder. "But she'll want proof. A body. Evidence. Then we give her evidence. My signet ring. My sword. Enough blood to make it convincing." Riker started stripping off his coat. "We do this now, before she gets suspicious about the lack of confirmation, before she runs." 30 minutes later, Commander Holt walked through the palace like a man carrying the weight of dead kings. His shoulder was bandaged, but blood still seeped through. His expression was shattered grief perfectly performed. And in his hands he carried Riker's signet ring, blood-stained sword, and a sealed message. Guards who saw him pass whispered. Servants fled from his path. Word spread like wildfire through the palace corridors. The king is dead. Assassinated in his chambers. The royal seer died defending him. Commander Holt was the only survivor. The message reached the old watchtower within minutes. And in the shadows of that crumbling stone structure, Counselor Thess read the word she'd been waiting for. Mission accomplished. King dead. Seer dead. Palace in chaos. Awaiting further orders. She smiled. Finally. After years of planning, months of maneuvering, weeks of desperate gambles, finally, the tyrant was dead. The kingdom would be free. and she would disappear before anyone thought to question the convenient timing of her survival. Tess gathered her things, preparing to vanish into the night. She never heard the door open behind her, never felt the blade at her throat until it was already pressed against skin. "Going somewhere?" Riker's voice was cold as death itself. Tess froze. In the doorway, very much alive, stood the king she'd tried so hard to kill. Beside him, equally alive, stood the healer, who should have been a corpse. And behind them, blocking the only exit, Commander Holt stood with murder in his eyes. "This isn't possible," Tess whispered. "Seems to be happening anyway." Riker pressed the blade fractionally harder. "Now, you're going to tell me everything. Every co-conspirator, every backup plan, every contingency you've prepared. And when you're done talking, I'm going to decide whether you die quick or slow." "You can't. I'm a member of the High Council. I have rights. You tried to assassinate your king. You hired professional killers. You manipulated and murdered to serve your own vision of how the kingdom should be ruled." Riker's voice was absolutely empty. "You have no rights, no protections, no escape. Just a choice about how much you suffer before the end." Tess looked at Naira. "You understand, don't you? What he is. What he's become. This proves everything I said. He's a tyrant who—" "Shut up," Naira said quietly. "But you saw it. You walked away from him because you knew. I walked away because I was afraid. Of him, of myself, of what we could become together. But fear isn't wisdom, and your conspiracy isn't justice." Naira moved closer. "You tried to kill me twice. Tried to kill him 3 times. All in the name of saving the kingdom from tyranny. But you're not a freedom fighter. You're just someone who couldn't accept that power had shifted beyond your control." "I was trying to save—" "Yourself," Riker finished. "That's all this ever was. Self-preservation dressed up as a noble sacrifice. And I'm done pretending otherwise." He pulled Tess backward, away from her prepared escape route, away from any weapons she might have hidden. "Holt," he said, "take her to the cells, the ones reserved for traitors, and make sure she understands that tomorrow, at dawn, she faces public execution for treason." "With pleasure, Your Majesty." As Holt dragged Tess from the watchtower, her screams echoing off stone walls, Riker finally lowered his blade. "It's over," he said, "for tonight." Naira moved to stand beside him at the tower window, looking out over the capital spread beneath them like scattered stars. "But there will be more. More conspiracies, more attempts, more people who think they know better than you how to rule." "I know. And we still haven't solved the fundamental problem. You're still a king who needs absolute control. I'm still someone who exists outside that control. Eventually, that contradiction is going to tear us apart." "Probably." Riker's hand found hers in the darkness. "But not tonight. Tonight we survived, together, against professional killers and political conspiracies and our own worst instincts. That has to count for something." "Does it? I don't know, but I'm willing to find out if you are." Naira looked at their joined hands, felt the calluses on his palm from sword work, felt the steady pulse at his wrist, proving he was alive despite everything that had tried to kill him. "I lost my gift," she said, "the one thing that made me valuable to you. The one thing that justified keeping me here. It's gone, and it's not coming back." "I know. So what happens now? Do you keep me out of obligation? Guilt? Some misguided sense that you owe me for almost dying to save your life?" "No." Riker turned to face her fully. "I keep you because you're the only person in this entire kingdom who looks at me and sees a man instead of a crown. Because you challenge me when I'm wrong and stand beside me when I'm right. Because you make me want to be something better than the tyrant everyone fears I'm becoming." He touched her face with his free hand. "Your gift was never why I wanted you to stay. It was just the excuse I used to avoid admitting I needed you for reasons I didn't understand. And now? Now I'm done with excuses. Done pretending this is strategy or politics or anything other than what it is." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "I don't know if this ends in disaster. Don't know if we'll destroy each other or save each other or something in between. But I know I'm not letting you walk away again. Not without a fight. Not without proving that sometimes 2 broken people can build something that isn't broken." Naira felt tears threatening and forced them back. "That's the most terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me." "Good. You terrify me too. Seems fair. She laughed despite everything, despite the blood and the murder attempts and the fundamental impossibility of what they were trying to build. "This is insane," she said. "Completely. We're going to fail. Probably. And when we do, it's going to hurt worse than anything that came before." "Almost certainly." Riker pulled her closer. "But failure tomorrow is better than safety alone tonight. At least for me. What about you?" Nira looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd been running from her entire life. Attachment, dependence, the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone matter enough to destroy you. And underneath all of that, barely visible, but definitely there, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, being seen was worth the risk of being hurt. "Ask me again tomorrow," she said. "After the execution. After the political fallout. After reality has time to remind us why this is impossible. And if tomorrow I ask and you still don't have an answer, then I'll stay until I do, or until staying becomes unbearable, whichever comes first." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a commitment. It was just honesty between two people who'd finally stopped pretending they knew how this would end. And somehow, that was enough. For now. Riker kissed her as the first light of dawn broke over the capital, turning stone towers pink and gold. Below them, a city prepared for the execution of a traitor. Above them, clouds gathered suggesting rain. And between them, something fragile and fierce and absolutely impossible began to dawn broke over the capital like a wound finally scabbing over. Ugly, necessary. The first step toward healing that would take longer than anyone wanted to admit. Nira stood at the window of Riker's chambers, watching the execution platform being assembled in the main square 3 stories below. Wood planks hammered into place by workers who'd done this too many times to need supervision. A crowd already gathering despite the early hour, drawn by the promise of spectacle and the hunger for certainty in uncertain times. Behind her, she heard Riker moving through the room, getting dressed, preparing for the performance that kingship demanded, especially when, everything felt like it was built on sand. "You don't have to watch," he said. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because she tried to kill us both. Because her conspiracy almost worked. Because if I look away now, I'm admitting I'm too weak for what comes next." Nira pressed her forehead against cold glass. "And I'm done being weak." Riker's reflection appeared in the window beside hers. He'd dressed in full royal regalia, black coat with silver clasps, crown that looked heavier than it probably was, expression carefully locked into the mask of absolute authority. But his eyes gave him away. They always did with her. "Thess asked to see you," he said. "Before the execution, one last conversation." "No." "I thought you'd say that, but I promised I'd ask." "Why would you promise her anything?" "Because even traitors get final request. It's tradition, and tradition is one of the few things holding this kingdom together right now." He turned from the window to face her directly. "But if you don't want to see her, you don't have to. I can tell her you refused." Nira closed her eyes, letting exhaustion wash over her. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw crossbow bolts and poison needles and futures she could no longer predict. "What would she even say?" she asked. "More justifications about saving the kingdom from tyranny? More accusations about what you've become?" "Probably, or maybe something else. Something honest now that there's nothing left to gain from lying." Riker's hand found hers. "But it's your choice, not mine, not duty, not tradition, just what you can live with when this is over." The careful way he said it made something crack in her chest. He was learning, slowly, imperfectly, but learning. How to give her choices instead of commands. How to respect her autonomy even when it cost him something. How to be a partner instead of a king when it mattered most. "Fine," she said. "I'll see her, but you're coming with me." "Are you sure? She might be more willing to talk if—" "I'm not going alone into a cell with someone who's tried to have me killed twice. I don't care if she's chained to a wall and guarded by an army. You're coming." Riker's smile was brief but genuine. "Fair enough." The dungeons beneath the palace were exactly as terrible as Nira had imagined. Stone walls sweating moisture, torches that created more shadow than light. The smell of despair and old violence thick enough to taste. Thess occupied the deepest cell, reserved for traitors and murderers, and those whose crimes were too heinous for lesser accommodations. She sat on a stone bench, hands and feet chained, dressed in the same robe she'd worn when they'd captured her. But the authority that had once clung to her like armor was gone now. stripped away by failure and the certainty of approaching death. She looked up when Riker and Naira entered. Her eyes were red but dry. No tears left or no willingness to show them. "You came," she said to Naira. "I'm here. You have 5 minutes. Use them wisely." Tess laughed, bitter and broken. 5 minutes. That's generous considering I tried to kill you, twice, as you keep reminding everyone. She shifted on the bench, chains rattling. I suppose I should start with an apology, express remorse, beg for mercy I don't deserve and won't receive. Don't bother, we both know you're not sorry. No, I'm not. Tess met Naira's eyes without flinching. I'd do it all again if given the chance, because everything I said was true. He is becoming a tyrant. You are the weakness that will break him, and this kingdom will suffer for both. Is that what you wanted to tell me? Riker's voice was cold. More prophecies of doom? More justifications for murder? No. I wanted to tell her the truth about what she is, what she's always been, what she'll become if she stays with you. Tess leaned forward as far as her chains allowed. You're not just a healer who sees probabilities, girl. You're a reality bender, a fate weaver, something that shouldn't exist because your very existence destabilizes the natural order. The physicians said the poison destroyed my gift. The physicians are idiots. The poison didn't destroy anything. It suppressed it, temporarily. Like putting a dam across a river. The water's still there, still building pressure, still looking for a way through. Tess's smile was sharp. And when it breaks through, when your power comes back stronger and less controlled than before, you'll reshape this kingdom whether you mean to or not. Every choice you make will bend reality. Every word you speak will become probability. And the king, she looked at Riker, will use you like the weapon you are until there's nothing left but the shape of what he wanted. That's not true, Riker said. Isn't it? You've already started, making her your royal seer, positioning her as your primary advisor, using her presence to undermine the council's authority. You're building your entire rule around someone you can't control, and you're calling it love to make yourself feel better about the exploitation. Enough. Nira's voice cut through the cell like a blade. You don't get to rewrite what happened. Don't get to pretend your conspiracy was noble when it was just fear and prejudice dressed up as pragmatism. You tried to kill us because we threatened your power. Everything else is justification after the fact. Maybe. Or maybe I'm the only one brave enough to say what everyone else is thinking. Tess slumped back against the wall. But it doesn't matter anymore. In an hour, I'll be dead. And you'll be free to make whatever mistakes you choose. I just hope you survive them long enough to realize I was right. Is that all? Riker asked. One more thing. Tess looked at Nira again. When your power comes back, and it will come back, remember that you have a choice. You can let him shape you into the weapon he needs, or you can walk away while you still have the strength to choose yourself over him. One of those paths leads to freedom. The other leads to becoming exactly what I feared most. And which path is which? If I knew that, I'd have succeeded instead of sitting here in chains waiting to die. Tess's smile was sad, almost pitying. But that's the thing about choices, isn't it? You never really know if you made the right one until it's too late to change it. Silence filled the cell, heavy with words that couldn't be unsaid, and futures that remained uncertain. Finally, Naira turned toward the door. Goodbye, counselor. I hope whatever comes after is kinder than what you leave behind. Wait. Tess's voice stopped her at the threshold. One last question. Not advice, not prophecy, just curiosity. What? Do you love him? Naira looked back at Riker. He stood very still, expression carefully neutral, but something in his eyes betrayed how much he wanted to hear her answer. I don't know, she said honestly. I know I'd die for him. Know I'd kill for him. Know that being near him feels like standing too close to a fire, dangerous and necessary, and impossible to walk away from, but whether that's love or something else entirely. She shrugged. Ask me again in a year. When the crisis has passed and reality has time to settle. When we're not just surviving, but actually living. Maybe then I'll have an answer. And if the answer is no, if you realize this was just proximity and adrenaline and the desperate need not to be alone, then I'll deal with that when it happens, same as every other impossible thing I've survived. Tess nodded slowly. Fair enough. Good luck, girl. You're going to need it. They left her there in the darkness, waiting for an execution that would come with the morning sun. The walk back to Riker's chambers was silent. What was there to say? The woman who'd tried to kill them both had just spoken truths neither wanted to examine too closely, about power and control and the ways love could become possession without anyone noticing the transition. She's wrong, Riker said finally, halfway up the eastern stairs. About which part? All of it. You're not a weapon. You're not something I'm using. And I'm not building my rule around you because I want to exploit what you can do. He stopped walking, turned to face her on the landing where they were alone. I'm trying to build something different. Something that isn't just control and domination and absolute authority. And I need you for that. Not because of your gift. Because of who you are when you're not trying to survive. Who am I when I'm not trying to survive? I don't know yet. Neither do you. That's what I'm hoping we figure out together. Nira studied his face in the dim torchlight, saw the cracks in his armor, the vulnerability he was learning to show instead of hide, the hope that looked fragile enough to shatter with a wrong word. What if Thess was right? She asked quietly. What if my power does come back? What if I become something that destabilizes everything you're trying to build? Then we deal with it. Together. The same way we've dealt with everything else. His hands found her shoulders. I'm not afraid of your power. I'm afraid of losing you to fear of what you might become. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. One is about controlling you. The other is about trusting you to control yourself. He pulled her closer. And I know which one I'm choosing. Question is whether you trust me enough to choose the same thing. Nira wanted to say yes, wanted to promise him certainty and commitment and all the things that normal relationships were built on. But she'd never been normal, and he'd never been safe. Ask me after the execution, she said, after we've seen this through to the end, after blood has been paid for blood, and the kingdom knows what happens to people who move against their king, then ask me what I'm choosing. Why wait? Because right now we are still in crisis mode, still reacting, still surviving, and decisions made in crisis rarely last once the danger passes. She touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. But if you ask me tomorrow, when everything's settled and boring and routine, and I still say yes, then you'll know it's real. Riker looked at her for a long moment. Then he kissed her forehead, gentle as prayer. Tomorrow then, he said. The execution happened at noon when the sun was high enough to see everything clearly, but not so high that shadows disappeared entirely. Symbolic, Nira supposed. Light and dark balanced. Justice and mercy weighed against each other. The crowd packed the main square so tightly that guards had to force corridors through for the royal procession. Thousands of faces turned toward the platform. Some angry, some afraid, some simply curious about watching a council member die for treason. Nira stood beside Riker on the royal viewing platform, positioned where everyone could see her. The healer who'd almost died. The royal seer who'd helped expose the conspiracy. The woman whose presence beside their king spoke volumes about how power was shifting in the kingdom. She felt their stares like physical weight. Thess was brought out in chains, walking with her head high despite everything. No tears, no pleas. Just cold dignity facing inevitable death. The executioner read the charges. Conspiracy, assassination, treason, murder of crown servants and hired assassins. The list went on long enough that people in the crowd started shifting restlessly. Finally, the reading finished. The executioner looked to Riker for confirmation. This was the moment, the point where mercy could be granted or justice could be served, where a king showed what kind of ruler he would be. Riker stood. The crowd fell silent. Counselor Thess, he said, voice carrying across the square without rising in volume. You were given authority to serve this kingdom, to advise its ruler, to help build order from chaos. And you used that authority to plan murder, to sow discord, to elevate your own vision above the will of your king and the needs of your people. Thess met his eyes without flinching. For these crimes, Riker continued, the law demands your death, and I am bound by law to enforce that sentence. But I'm also bound by conscience to acknowledge a truth that makes this execution harder than it should be. The crowd leaned forward. You were not entirely wrong, Riker said, and gasps rippled through the square. I have consolidated power in ways that make abuse possible. I have suppressed dissent in the name of order. I have built a system where absolute authority rests in one person, me. And that concentration of power creates exactly the kind of tyranny you feared. Tess's expression shifted, surprise breaking through her careful composure. But the solution to concentrated power is not assassination. It's not conspiracy. It's not violence dressed up as liberation. Riker's voice hardened. It's accountability. It's transparency. It's building systems that check authority instead of destroying authority entirely. And that work, that slow, unglamorous, necessary work, requires people to stay alive long enough to implement it. He paused. Let the silence build. You chose the easy path, the dramatic path, the path that would have made you a martyr or a hero depending on who won. And in choosing that path, you proved exactly why concentrated power is dangerous. Because you were willing to kill to preserve your vision of how things should be, just like I've been willing to execute to preserve mine. Nira felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the speech of a tyrant. This was something else, something harder. Acknowledgement. So I'm making a choice, Riker said, a choice that will probably make me look weak, probably encourage more conspiracies, probably be seen as a mistake by everyone who values strength over mercy. He looked at Tess. I'm commuting your sentence. You will not be executed today. Instead, you will spend the rest of your life imprisoned here in the capital, and every day of that imprisonment you will watch as I try, and probably fail, to build the kind of accountability you claim to want. You'll see whether power can be checked without being destroyed, whether I can learn to govern with consultation instead of domination, whether the healer beside me is a corrupting influence or a necessary balance. The crowd erupted, confusion and anger and surprise all tangled together. Riker raised his hand. Silence crashed back down. This is not mercy, he said. This is pragmatism. Dead, you're a martyr. Alive, you're a warning. And I need warnings more than I need symbols of strength. He gestured to the guards. Take her back to the cells. Solitary confinement. No visitors except by my direct order. And make sure she understands this is not forgiveness. This is just a different kind of punishment. Thies was led away, too shocked to speak. The crowd didn't know how to react. Half looked disappointed they wouldn't see blood. Half looked relieved that maybe their king wasn't as brutal as they'd feared. Nira looked at Riker. He looked back, expression carefully neutral. That was either the smartest thing you've ever done, she said quietly, or the stupidest. Probably both. Ask me in a year which one it was. Did you plan that? The speech about accountability and checking power? No. I planned to execute her, planned to make an example that would terrify anyone else thinking about conspiracy. His jaw tightened. But standing up there, looking at her face, I realized something. If I kill everyone who questions my authority, I prove them right about what I'm becoming, and I'm tired of proving my enemies right. So you're really going to try? To build systems that check your power? I don't know, maybe. If I can figure out how, without destabilizing everything. He turned to face the crowd still milling below. But I know I can't keep doing what I've been doing. Can't keep consolidating control and calling it order. Can't keep treating dissent like treason just because it's easier than addressing legitimate concerns. That's a significant change in philosophy. I know. Probably won't last. Probably going to revert to type the first time someone seriously threatens the kingdom. He smiled, sharp and self-aware. But for now, in this moment, I'm trying, and that's more than I was doing before you arrived. Nira felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty, not safety, just the recognition that maybe, just maybe, they were both capable of changing in ways neither had thought possible. Come on, Riker said, offering his arm. We have about 6 hours before the council demands emergency session to discuss my apparent insanity. Let's use them wisely. Doing what? Being people instead of king and seer, just for a little while. They left the platform together, walking through corridors that felt different somehow, lighter. Or maybe that was just Nira's imagination projecting hope onto stone and shadow. The rest of the day passed in a blur of bureaucracy and damage control. Council members demanding explanations. Military commanders expressing concern about appearing weak. Court officials scrambling to figure out how to implement accountability measures that didn't exist yet. Riker handled it with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else. Listening more than he commanded. Asking questions instead of issuing orders. slowly, carefully, starting to dismantle the absolute authority he'd spent 15 years building. It was exhausting to watch, but it was also beautiful in its way. Naira stayed beside him through all of it, offering perspective when asked, staying silent when not. Learning the rhythms of governance from someone who was simultaneously the system's greatest strength and its fundamental weakness. By the time night fell, they were both beyond exhausted. Riker dismissed the last petitioner with promises to address their concerns in the morning. Then he slumped in his throne like someone had cut his strings. "I'm too tired to walk," he said. "Then don't. Sleep there. I'm sure it's comfortable." "It's absolutely not. This thing was designed to project authority, not provide comfort." He forced himself upright. "But I should at least make it to actual bed before collapsing." They made their way back to his chambers in silence. Guards nodded as they passed but didn't speak. Even they seemed to understand that words would be too much right now. Inside, Riker stripped off his formal coat with movements that suggested every muscle hurt. "I need to ask you something." "Now? Can it wait until morning when we're both capable of thinking clearly?" "No. Because morning means meetings and decisions and 1,000 things demanding attention. And I need to know this while we're still just us." He turned to face her. "Are you staying?" There it was. The question he'd promised to ask after the execution, after the crisis had passed, after reality had time to settle into something resembling normal. Naira looked at him across the dim chamber, saw exhaustion and hope and fear all tangled together in his expression, saw a man who'd spent his entire life controlling everything finally learning to ask instead of command. "I don't know," she said honestly. Pain flashed across his face. "He tried to hide it. Failed. Not because I don't want to," Naira continued quickly, "but because I genuinely don't know if I can survive what staying means. Don't know if I'm strong enough to be what you need. Don't know if my power will come back and make me dangerous. Don't know if we'll destroy each other or save each other or something in between." So that's a no. That's a, I need time to figure out who I am outside of crisis before I promise you forever. She moved closer to him. "You commuted Thessa's sentence instead of executing her. You started talking about accountability and checking power. You're changing, and that's good. That's necessary. But I need to change too. Need to figure out what I want instead of just reacting to what everyone else needs from me." "How much time?" "I don't know. Weeks, months. However long it takes to feel like myself again instead of just survival instinct wrapped in skin." Riker absorbed this, expression shifting through emotions too fast to track. "And where will you be during this time?" "Here, in the palace. Unless you'd prefer I leave." "No!" The word came out sharp, desperate. "No, stay, please. I need to know you're close, even if we're not." He stopped, started over. "I'm not good at this. At wanting people without trying to own them. At caring without controlling, and I don't know how to give you space while also keeping you safe. You start by trusting that I can keep myself safe." Naira reached up, touched his face. "And by understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let me figure things out alone." "I hate that." "I know. Do it anyway." He pulled her against him, holding on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. "What if you decide to leave? What if you take all this time and space and figure out you're better off without me? Then I leave, and you let me go without making it harder than it already is." She felt his heart hammering against her chest. "But I don't think that's what's going to happen." "No?" "No. I think I'm going to spend a few weeks remembering who I was before crisis and survival became my entire identity. And then I'm going to come back to you, and we're going to try building something that isn't just mutual need disguised as partnership." "You sound certain." "I'm not, but I'm hopeful. And hope is better than nothing." Riker's laugh was breathless. "You're going to destroy me." "Probably. But you'll deserve it for all the times you almost destroyed me." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "This is what choosing each other looks like. Not possession, not desperation, just two people who are willing to do the hard work of becoming better so they don't ruin each other. And if the hard work doesn't fix us, then at least we tried. That's more than most people get." He kissed her then, gentle and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. And she kissed him back, tasting hope and fear in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, Both breathing hard, Naira stepped toward the door. "Where are you going?" Riker asked. "To the Azure Suite. To sleep in my own bed. To start practicing being separate so we can learn how to be together without it being suffocating." "Now? Tonight?" "Especially tonight. Because if I stay here, if I let myself fall into the easy comfort of proximity, I'll never know if what I feel is real or just habit." She opened the door, paused. "I'll see you tomorrow. At the council meeting, where you're going to continue being annoyingly reasonable, and I'm going to continue offering perspective you don't want to hear." "Naira, tomorrow, Riker. We have tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days that come after that. Let that be enough for now." She left before he could argue, before her own resolve could crack, before the ache in her chest could convince her that staying was easier than growing. The Azure Suite felt different now. Not like a cage, not like luxury hiding bars, just like a room where someone lived who was trying to figure out who she was. Naira stripped off her dress, washed away the day's weight, and fell into bed wearing nothing but exhaustion. Sleep came fast, and for the first time since drinking poison meant for a king, she didn't dream of death. She dreamed of morning light on marble floors, of council chambers where voices rose in argument instead of fear, of a throne room that looked less like a temple to power and more like a place where work got done. She dreamed of futures she couldn't predict, and that was terrifying. And that was perfect. 3 months passed like water finding its level. Slow, inevitable, reshaping everything it touched. Naira threw herself into learning governance, sat in on council meetings where Riker was implementing his promised accountability measures, watched him struggle with delegating authority he'd spent 15 years consolidating, saw him fail more often than he succeeded but keep trying anyway. She also threw herself into rediscovering who she'd been before survival became her identity. Walked through the capital markets without guards, just another person buying bread and fruit. Volunteered at the healing houses, using medical knowledge that had nothing to do with supernatural gifts. Made friends with servants and merchants and people who had no idea she was the royal seer, and slowly, carefully, she felt something return. Not her gift, herself. The person she'd been before power and politics and assassination attempts had defined her existence. Riker gave her space. It clearly cost him. She'd see him watching her across crowded rooms with expression that suggested he was physically restraining himself from closing the distance. But he stayed back. Trusted her process even when it terrified him. That trust meant more than any declaration of love could have. They still saw each other daily, still worked together on kingdom business, still argued about policy and strategy and the best way to implement change without triggering revolt. But they didn't fall into bed together. Didn't let physical intimacy replace the harder work of emotional connection. Didn't use desire as a shortcut past the fundamental question of whether they could actually build something sustainable. It was the hardest thing Naira had ever done. It was also the most important. And then exactly 93 days after she'd walked out of his chambers that first night, her gift came back. It didn't announce itself with fanfare or drama. Just a quiet morning where she woke up and could suddenly see probability trees branching out from every choice again. Could feel the shape of futures pressing against the present. Could sense the 1,000 different ways reality might unfold depending on what decisions got made. It felt like coming home and discovering the house had been rearranged while she was gone. Familiar, but different. Known, but strange. She sat on the edge of her bed for an hour, just breathing through the sensations, letting herself adjust to seeing again after months of blindness. Then she got dressed and went to find Riker. He was in his private study reviewing reports from the northern provinces. He looked up when she entered, started to smile, then froze at whatever he saw in her expression. "It's back," he said. Not a question. As of this morning, Tess was right. The poison suppressed it, didn't destroy it, and now it's back stronger than before. Naira moved to stand in front of his desk. "I can see probabilities again. Can feel futures shifting. Can bend reality if I choose to speak outcomes into existence." How does it feel? Terrifying, powerful, like holding lightning and trying to decide whether to throw it or ground it. She met his eyes. "And I need to tell you something about what I saw the moment my gift returned." Riker set down his reports. "I'm listening." "I saw our futures. All of them. Every possible path branching out from this moment. And there are three main probability streams. Three ways this could go depending on choices we make in the next few minutes. Tell me, in one future I stay here and become exactly what Tess feared. Your weapon, your tool. Someone who uses her gift to serve your agenda until there's nothing left of who I was. We're together, but it's hollow. And within 5 years, I've reshaped so much reality that the kingdom starts coming apart at the seams. Riker's expression didn't change, but his hands gripped the desk edge hard enough to whiten knuckles. In another future, Nira continued, I leave. Right now. Walk away while I still can. And you let me go because you've learned that love means respecting autonomy even when it destroys you. I survive. You survive. But we spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been if we'd been braver. And the third? In the third future, we build something new. Something that's never been tried in this kingdom. I stay, but not as your seer or your advisor or your anything except your equal. We create a formal power-sharing structure. Not marriage, something harder. A governing partnership where my authority checks yours and vice versa. Where neither of us can act without the other's consent on matters of state. Where my gift is used to see threats but never to manipulate outcomes in our favor. She took a breath. It's the hardest path. The one most likely to fail. The one that requires us both to give up control in ways that will terrify us daily. But it's also the only path where we both become better instead of one of us being consumed by the other. Riker stood, moved around the desk to stand in front of her. Which future do you want? The third. Always the third. Even knowing how hard it will be, even knowing we'll probably fail more often than we succeed. She reached for his hands, but I can't choose it alone. This one requires both of us to commit, both of us to trust, both of us to keep choosing each other, even when it's easier to revert to type. And if I say no, if I tell you I can't share power that way, that it goes against every instinct I have, then I choose the second future. I leave. Because I've learned that I'd rather be alone than be owned, even by someone She stopped, started over. Even by someone I might love if given the chance to find out. Riker looked at her for a long moment. She saw him wrestling with it, saw the part of him that wanted absolute control fighting the part that wanted her more than control. Saw him making the choice in real time. How would it work? He asked finally. This power-sharing structure? We'd have to create it from nothing. Write new laws, establish precedent, make me officially your co-ruler in everything but title. Nira felt hope building dangerous and fragile in her chest. It would be messy. The council would hate it. The nobility would revolt. We'd spend years fighting just to make it functional. But it would mean you stay. It would mean we try, together, as actual partners instead of king and kept thing. I could hurt you so badly with this. Could find ways to manipulate the structure to serve my agenda. Could turn partnership into another form of control. I know. I'm trusting you not to. Trusting that these 3 months of watching you try to be better weren't performance. Trusting that you meant it when you said you wanted me as equal instead of possession. And if I fail, if I revert to type despite best intentions, then I use my gift to see it coming and leave before you destroy me. That's the check. That's the balance. My ability to walk away is what keeps the partnership honest. Riker pulled her closer. She could feel his heart hammering, could see futures shifting in response to choices being made in real time. This is insane, he said. Completely. It's never been done before. I know. We're going to fail, probably spectacularly, almost certainly, but we'll fail trying to build something better instead of failing by never trying at all. He rested his forehead against hers. I love you, and that terrifies me. Because love makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability gets people killed in my world. I know, love terrifies me too, but I'm choosing it anyway, choosing you anyway, choosing us anyway. She felt tears threatening and didn't fight them. So ask me again. Ask me the question you asked 3 months ago. Are you staying? Yes. Not because I have to, not because you've trapped me, not because I can't survive alone, but because I choose this. Choose you. Choose the impossible work of becoming better together than we could be apart. Riker kissed her then, and it felt different than all the times before. Less desperate, less like drowning, more like breathing. We should probably tell the council. he said when they finally broke apart. They're going to lose their minds. Good. They need the exercise. He pulled back, expression shifting into something sharper. And we should move fast, before anyone can organize opposition, before the probability of success drops below viable. Already thinking tactically. I'm a king. Tactical thinking is what I do. But his smile was genuine. Though I'm trying to become a king who thinks tactically about building instead of just controlling. That's all I'm asking, that you try. Then let's do this. Let's build something impossible and probably doomed and absolutely necessary. He offered his hand. Partners? Naira took it, felt futures crystallize around the choice, saw the probability tree simplify into a single path forward, hard, messy, beautiful, unknown. Partners, she agreed. 6 months later, the kingdom had a new governing structure that made historians weep and political theorists ecstatic. The dual authority mandate formalized what Naira and Riker had been building in practice. Neither could issue decrees without the other's consent. Neither could declare war or make treaties alone. Neither could execute or pardon without shared agreement. It was inefficient. It was revolutionary. It was working, barely, imperfectly, with more failures than successes. But it was working. The council had indeed lost their minds. Half had resigned in protest. The other half stayed to see if this mad experiment would collapse under its own weight. So far it hadn't. Naira stood at the window of what used to be just Riker's chambers, but was now officially theirs, watching the capital settle into evening. 6 months of partnership. 6 months of arguing and compromising and learning to govern together. 6 months of slowly, painfully, building trust that ran deeper than desire or need. You're thinking too loud, Riker said behind her. She turned. He was sprawled on their bed, reading reports even at this hour, looking exhausted and content in equal measure. I was thinking about probability, she said. What about it? About how the most unlikely outcomes sometimes become reality, just because people are stubborn enough to keep choosing them. She moved to sit beside him. We shouldn't work. By every logical measure, this partnership should have imploded by now, but it hasn't. Give it time. We've only been at this 6 months. Plenty of opportunities for catastrophic failure ahead. Always the optimist. Someone has to balance your reckless hope. He set down his reports, pulled her against him. Though I'll admit, this is better than I expected. Harder than I wanted, but better. High praise from a former tyrant. Recovering tyrant, I'm still in therapy for my control issues. Naira laughed. It was a real sound, free, the kind of laugh she'd forgotten she was capable of before relearning it here. I love you, she said. First time speaking it out loud. First time certain enough to commit to the words. Riker went very still. You've never said that before. I know. Wanted to be sure I meant it. Sure it wasn't just proximity or need or trauma bonding dressed up as affection. She met his eyes. But I'm sure now. I love you. Not despite your flaws, but including them. Not because you're perfect, but because you're trying to be better. Not because I need you to survive, but because I choose you anyway. That might be the least romantic declaration of love I've ever heard. You're dating the wrong person if you expected romance. Apparently so. But his smile was soft, genuine. The expression he only wore when they were alone and unguarded. I love you too, in case that wasn't obvious from the complete restructuring of kingdom governance to accommodate your presence. I thought that was just pragmatism. It was both. I'm multifaceted. They sat together as darkness settled over the capital. Two people who shouldn't work but did. Two people who'd chosen the hard path over the easy one and were somehow still standing. What do you see? Riker asked. When you look at our future now? Naira closed her eyes, sinking into the scene. Probability trees bloomed in her mind's eye. Hundreds of futures, thousands, each one branching from choices not yet made. I see us fighting. A lot. About policy and strategy and how to balance power without one of us dominating the other. She opened her eyes. I see us failing sometimes, reverting to type, falling into old patterns before catching ourselves. Sounds grim. I also see us learning, growing, building something that outlasts us both, creating a kingdom where power is shared instead of hoarded, where authority requires consent instead of force. She smiled. I see us old and gray and still arguing about everything, still challenging each other, still choosing each other despite how much easier it would be not to. How probable is that future? Honestly, maybe 30%. Most futures still end in some form of failure or separation. She turned to face him fully. But 30% is better than zero, and I'll take those odds if you will. I've staked my entire kingdom on worse odds. 30% sounds downright comfortable. They kissed then, slow and deep, and full of promises neither could guarantee, but both were willing to try for. Outside, the city settled into night. Guards changed watch. Servants extinguished lights. Nobles plotted and schemed and made plans that would be brought before the dual authority for approval or rejection. And in chambers that now belonged to two people instead of one, a former healer and a recovering tyrant held each other and planned for a tomorrow that had never existed before. Not perfect, not certain, not safe, but theirs. Chosen. Built from impossible odds and stubborn hope, and the absolute refusal to let power destroy what they were building together. Years later, historians would debate whether the dual authority mandate was genius or madness. The answer, like most truths, was both. But in that moment, in that room, none of that mattered. What mattered was the choice, and the willingness to keep making it every single day, until choice became habit, became foundation, became the thing that saved them both from becoming what they'd feared most. Controllers, consumers, tyrants wearing love as justification for possession. Instead, they became something rarer. Partners. Equals. Two people powerful enough to destroy kingdoms, choosing instead to build one where power learned its limits. And that, more than any conquest, any crown, any absolute authority, that was enough.